Hi, good morning. Morning, everybody. Let me welcome, most importantly, my wife to this budget briefing, and to our finance team led by Keely and my chief of staff and all of the cabinet secretaries that are assembled here. Substantively, from Health and Human Service, Mark Alley, who I imagine you may have a few questions for him at the end of this briefing. I also want to thank everybody that's watching this online, and I want to, in advance of the presentation, state what I stated last year, and that is requests for forgiveness, that I don't enter into the process of the budget lightly, but thoughtfully. I've spent the last many months working on the details of this document. I take deep pride in that process, and as a consequence, I take it upon myself to make the presentation, to brief you on the details in this budget. That may be a deviation from the past, and for some, I know last year was a pattern interrupt, but I want you to be prepared that I'm going to extend this as a new pattern. And I do that because I want you to know what my priorities are. I want you to know what matters to me. So there's no ambiguity, so I can distill the essence of what I think is important as we set the tone and the tenor for the new year. The budget for me is not just in the broad strokes a statement of values. It also is a statement that sets a tone and tenor of prioritization to advance those values. The budget is not what, it's not why, it's a how document. It's the application and the implementation of our ideals. And so I will lay out in prescriptive terms some of our goals and tie them to specific budget requests that we'll be asking of the legislature. And then I will avail myself to as many questions as you may have. We will begin, though, if I may, with just a bit of a preamble, because I think it's important. There's almost, it seems at times, a California derangement syndrome going on in popular media, that somehow our best days are behind us, that somehow California is not hitting on many cylinders. I think it's important to note that we are enjoying not just record unemployment, low unemployment at 3.9% from a peak of 12.2%, but we're also enjoying 117 months of consecutive net job growth on our way to 118 months. That's unprecedented in California history. Over the last 5 years, the state of California has averaged 3.8% GDP growth. On average, 3.8% GDP growth. That outperforms states like Texas, Florida, and other states that are often deemed competitors of the state of California. We're enjoying record surpluses. We have seen our bond ratings increase not once but twice in the last 12 months, and we are paying down an unprecedented amount of money in terms of our debts and our long-term obligations. I'm proud of all of that. We lead the nation in startups. We have innovation running through our brains and our veins. We lead the world in our system of higher education, conveying more talent than any other state and or nation on the globe. We have more engineers, more scientists, more researchers, more Nobel laureates than any other state in the nation. We lead in two-way trade. We are number one in manufacturing. I could continue. This is not a state of the state, but I want to begin there because I'm very proud to be a Californian. I'm proud of this state, and I'm proud of the budget that we are presenting today, because I am not naive about the areas where we're falling short, and will be as transparent as I possibly can be about how we can meet the moment and match our intention with real resources, not just a resourceful mindset. So 1 out of every 7 jobs in the United States of America since the recession, the bottom of the recession, has come from the great state of California. We have significantly advanced efforts beginning over the course of multiple years, and I want to compliment Governor Jerry Brown for setting the tone and tenor. We've begun a process to eliminate that wall of debt. I'll remind you that wall of debt was $34.7 billion when Governor Brown took the oath of office. 100% of that debt was paid off in the last fiscal year. Remaining $4.5 billion, as is noted in that chart, was advanced. That was a significant step to doing something we have not done in this state in quite some time by any objective measures, at least a decade and a half. I would argue the last few decades we've not been in the position of having paid off all of our debts and deferrals as we were successful in doing so last year. We also committed to something that I'm just not aware of any other state in the nation. Now, I would love to be I'd love to be told otherwise, and I mean this quite sincerely, but I'm not aware of any other state that's used general fund surplus money to pay down at this rate long-term unfunded obligations. And you see here the unprecedented $9.1 billion that we advanced to pay down those unfunded liabilities. As you know, that's a multi-year commitment. In the budget that I'm submitting today, you will note that $6.8 billion will be advanced through the forecast period. And when I refer to the forecast period, I refer to the budget year plus 3 years. That's the forecast period. And this budget is a balanced budget through the forecast period. I'll repeat that because that has not traditionally been the case, even just a few years ago. The budget that we have and we are submitting today is a balanced budget through the forecast period. It commits an additional amount of resources to PERS and STIRS, which I'll mention in a moment, but advances that commitment we made last year, that multi-year pension payment program. Don't get me wrong, pension issue remains daunting in the state of California. By our estimates, $250.6 billion. Now, not all of that is borne by the state. All of you, I know, are familiar with the STIRS component of that. Not all of that, $101.99 million is a state obligation. So you can net it out to about $181.99 billion. We have a STIRS challenge, nonetheless, 65.7% funded, and a PERS challenge at 69.5%. Those are numbers that are the latest numbers. We're waiting for the new numbers to come out. Those numbers are from June 30th, 2018. And so I make that point to contextualize the importance of this line on this document. We've got to get serious about those long-term obligations, and we are getting serious about them. We started that process last year. It's a multi-year commitment, and in a moment I'll be talking about additional resources that we're placing to begin the process anew to continue to pay down those unfunded liabilities. As it relates to our rainy day, it's often the first question we get: what is the rainy day reserve look like this year? Well, there you have it, $18 billion. Don't go over here yet. $18 billion from last year's 16. In the revised budget was 16.5. I can get into the details on that. I've confused you. Nonetheless, it's $18 billion this year, but over the forecast period, we'll get it up to $19.4 billion. I should note, in and around 2021, 2022, it reaches the 10% statutory cap. That's why it begins to slow down moving into the future years. Again, when you have questions, I'm happy to offer some insight and some understanding about what that means and what it doesn't mean, because remember, the rainy day fund is not the totality of our reserves. This budget includes $21 billion of reserves. You'll recall we have 3 other reserve accounts. We have the special fund for economic uncertainties. That's at $1.6 billion above the $18 billion. We have the safety net reserve. I want to compliment Senator Mitchell and others for the creation, Senator Atkins, the creation of that safety net reserve at $900 million. And this year, because of the economic growth and expansion and the fiscal discipline that's been advanced in this state, we'll be able to contribute an additional $100 million to the school stabilization account. It will now total $487 million. That's remarkable in and of itself, that there is now a reserve account for our public education system. That's something I can assure you when the architects of Prop 98 came together, they did not expect to see in their lifetime. We're very proud that we're seeing it advanced today. We are projecting a $5.6 billion surplus. We contrast that to the $7 billion surplus that came out from the Legislative Analyst Office. Let me tell you why it's different. Substantively, we are not including the MCO tax. We'll talk a lot more, if you wish, about the MCO tax. We can't include it because the money is not forthcoming. We absolutely anticipate receiving the MCO tax. We are in firm legal footing. We are grounded in our efforts, and we will advance them as we have. We will follow through aggressively, but that's not included in our projection. We also have some usual multi-year differences with the LAO's office, some carrying balance issues that are distinguished between the two numbers, and then always there's some differences with Health and Human Service. We could talk about those, but we're within the ballpark, and I'm not here to say anything but express appreciation to the incredible work the LAO does and finance does, and continues to impress me how close they are. In the past, that was not always the case. They'll be updating their numbers soon. They have the benefit soon of the numbers we already had the benefit of having. They'll make those adjustments. So that's the revenue surplus this year. The budget is this is an easy one for you all to remember. Budget this year is $222.2 billion. 2222. Which is 2.3% larger than last year. For those fiscal hawks, that's not 12.3, it's 2.3% higher than last year. The general fund is $153.1 billion. So 222.2 top line, general fund 153.1, which is 2.2%, the general fund above last year's number. We specifically, by the way, just so I'm clear on the MCO, anticipate that with the MCO tax, when we do receive it, which we do include in the multi-year budget, that it will allow us to extend the suspensions on 21 programs that we suspended on December 31st of 2021 last year. This was a point we made in the May revise, clarified any ambiguities. Those programs included HSS, or rather IHSS, some Prop 56 monies, DDS enhancements, diapers, tampons. Those now will be extended by an additional 18 months. Those tax exemptions, particular to the issues of diapers and tampons. We now have a suspension of July on 2023, not December of 2021. We continue to model reality, which is the past does not equal the future. And while we've enjoyed 11 years of economic growth and expansion, that is not a permanent state, though for some, they may feel like it is. We're seeing a contraction of economic growth. Our proposal, or rather our budget, includes 3.4% revenue growth, but it declines to 1.98% in 2022-2023. We're seeing a contraction of expansion. We're not seeing a contracting economy. We're seeing a slowing down of our economic growth. And that is reflected in this budget. But we also continue to reflect expectation, which is a slide you've seen for so many years that I asked the team, please don't show me this slide again this year. But they said, we have modeled, we have updated, and the numbers remain constant. In a recession that's a little deeper than 2001, a little less steep than the one that we experienced after 2007, we'll model a $70 billion revenue adjustment over a 3-year period, which is a $40 billion impact on our general fund over a 3-year period. Reminding you of Prop 98 guarantees Prop 2. So I know some people love running with the screaming headline of the $70 billion. From a budgetary perspective, it is a $40 billion number that is deep in our consciousness and is a deep part of our construct as it relates to the work that we're doing. Let me jump in. We once again get to say this, and I hope I'm back next year to say it again, with the highest level of investment ever in our K through 14 budget. As you recall, last year in the revised budget was $81.6 billion. This year, $84 billion to our schools. That represents a 3.03% growth. We have seen, by the way, growth in the state of California since 2011 by roughly $7,200 per pupil. And I want to bring it down to the school level, and I want to bring it down in terms that I think are most pressing for the state of California. While that progress is numerical, and it certainly is represented in California's state ranking, none of us are naive, none of us are spiking the ball to suggest despite those improvements, we still haven't moved these numbers as far to the right, your right, as we would like. But there's progress, because I read often there's been no progress in the state of California in terms of educational outcomes and achievement, but in reading and mathematics, we are making progress. It's stubborn and it's slow. Someone said to me the other day, boy, I hope you don't bring that slide out, because all you're going to be arguing for is failing more efficiently. That may be one point of view. Other points of view are stubbornly, we're making progress. We can abandon our investments in those areas, or we can double down on them. I would prefer to double down on what's working and abandon the investments that are not working. And so we soberly look at those, but we also recognize that underneath these are disparities that are being closed and disparities that persist. Let me start with the good news. You're seeing for low-income students, you're seeing for Hispanic students, Latino, Latinas, and children who enter in as English learners, we are seeing some steady progress in closing those achievement gaps. Where we are not seeing progress is for African Americans, those with disabilities, and these science scores, if you overlay socioeconomics with race, they are deplorable in contrast to what they should be and can be. So that's the bad news. And this, I know we focus a lot on. We have to start getting serious and do something about it. Here's what we posit. Here's what we argue in our budget. We believe the biggest achievement boost is fully prepared teachers. I hired Linda Darling Hammond. You did. She said yes to me. You're paying for her salary. Linda's an expert in this space. She has studied best practices across the United States. We did a deep dive of last year. Why is Massachusetts outperforming California? Why has New Jersey made some real progress in the last few years? We did a deep, deep dive. For all of the fanciful things, it's not that damn complicated. They didn't zig to zag. They didn't go from one fancy proposal this year to another new proposal next year to chase headlines and have a bunch of academics applaud the new approach. It was a steady focus on the basics. And none more important than investing in our teachers. And that's why this year we are addressing the teacher issue in a way we haven't in the past. Reminding you, not dissimilar to last year, this number is consistent. 75% of the districts have teacher shortages, and we all know in the STEM subject matters in special ed, that's where the teacher shortages are most acute. We also know that there are 23 low-performing districts in this state that have overrepresentation of African American students, high poverty districts that are overly represented by African American students. It seems self-evident that we should focus and concentrate our efforts in those areas in order to address the last slide, to address the substantive and vexing issue as it relates to academic achievement for our African American students. And so our commitment this year is to go even deeper than we did last year. 900 $5.1 million will be invested in workforce investment grants, professional development grants for existing teachers. $900 million will also support recruitment strategies. We are seeing real issues at the CSU as it relates to the number of people that are entering in to get educated into the workforce ultimately, but that's the feeder system. That's where we're conveying that talent. That's the educational platform. We have got to focus on recruitment, getting more college graduates to consider getting credentialed, and we've got to focus on these specific subject matters where we're seeing deep systemic underrepresentation. And when I say underrepresentation, I also just want to make this point. It's incredibly important that we have a diverse teaching workforce. You look at all the academic research, not only having stable, prepared, professional teacher, but also a teacher that looks like you. That's incredibly important as it relates to particularly African American achievement, and that's going to be a big part of our effort this year as well. We're also going to invest $175 million in this teacher residency program. So while people are getting a full year of credential, we are going to allow them to get the kind of mentorship that they deserve under the tutelage of a great teacher. And we're going to really focus those efforts on special ed and, again, low-income communities. We're doing $20,000 stipends. If you teach 4 years and you teach in a high-needs school, we're going to create an economic incentive, $20,000 stipends. That's a $100 million commitment just in this budget year to award those teachers for doing the right thing and address that stubborn fact that in our high poverty schools we have three times as many unprepared teachers. Again, it's not that complicated. Train your teachers, make them the best, the brightest, incentivize, focusing on underperforming high poverty districts. That's what we're doing this year. $900 million plus an extra 100,000. $900.1 million. We also are providing additional supports that I can talk about in terms of credentialing, beyond that, some work we're doing with classified employees, which are important, and we can get into those details if you wish. I'm passionate about special ed. I think most of you know that, and because I was one of them growing up. It's a miracle that I'm here. Someone struggled with speech, and someone that struggled academically. I had remarkable people that intervened, and I'm standing at this podium with the privilege of this presentation. The special ed issue in the state of California is a crisis. You can sugarcoat it, but it should not be. And again, you guys know I try not to use that word or overuse that word, but it's a crisis, and it's a real shame. We're better than that, and we're going to do better than we have in the past. Last year, you may recall, we put $645.3 million in the budget for special ed. This year, we're putting $895 million into special ed. So building on last year, we now have a total of $895 million to focus on training and diagnosing, focus on deep commitment, something my wife talks to me about all the time, social emotional learning, the deep focus on early intervention. We want to incentivize payments to get in earlier, focus on 3 to 5 year olds, not wait 5+ years old. So it's money to incentivize earlier screenings, some preschool grants, but a significant enhancement in this year's budget. I can get into the SEPLA issue, which you all, those local plan areas, which these are going to be tough reforms. My eyes are wide open, but for the SEPLA community, we're going to lean in. It's a multi-year commitment, but we are advancing those reforms that I hinted at in last year's budget and budget presentation. On the LCFF, a lot has been written about the LCFF. I'm a supporter of the LCFF. I'm not walking away from it. But I recognize what the audit recognized, that we need some more transparency. We need more accountability. I'll remind you, we didn't wait for the audit findings last year. We anticipated them. About half of the audit findings, plus or minus, we can quantify that, we addressed in last year's budget as it relates to the LCAPs and the dashboards, more transparency models, more technical support for the districts, et cetera. But we recognize we have more work to do this year. Here's substantively what we want to do. We want to provide $300 million to our lowest performing districts for these opportunity grants that would allow for, as an example, extended learning, more technical assistance. So substantive investment of $300 million to address some of the areas, not just the technical issues of transparency and how the money's flowing, but moreover to address the purpose, the thrust of what the LCFF was all about, which was closing gaps and addressing the needs of ESL and addressing the needs of our diverse communities. These block grants powerfully will be invested in that space and I think ultimately advance that cause. I am someone that believes in community schools. What I mean by community schools is partnerships, public partnerships, not just public-private partnerships. Those are the kind of partnerships where we build capacity, existing capacity, and we leverage that. Wellness centers, bringing health community into our public education system. And I'll be talking a lot about this new proposal called, lazily in bureaucratic terms, CalAIM, which is a big part of advancing that thrust on those kinds of public-public partnerships. But we're putting an additional $300 million up in the community school space. And I want to just compliment Member Chu, among many others that have been pushing us to do more in this space. It's the integration of mental health, physical health, adolescent mental health, not just physical health, and continuing to build capacity. We're also investing in 21st century skills. Last year we seeded our CS for CA program, which was our computer science for California program. We're doing more this year. We're doing $10,000 incentives for certification programs. We're going to be distributing statewide best practices. We're going to be building capacity with the private sector to help support our efforts. So we have a big initiative on computer science education. And then, because I would be remiss, perhaps the real reason my wife is here is she's been working on the issue of student meals. These things become important to you when you have 4 kids and you adjudicate the why. They're still having pizza and burritos and not eating healthy and well, and you read those damn headlines coming from Betsy DeVos and the Trump administration rolling back the good work of the Obama administration, particularly Michelle Obama. Rather than complaining about it, we're going to do something about it. We have not, except 2006, 2007, so last time we touched this program, the old Moscone nickel. That's for folks here that have been here too long, or maybe a long time. No one's been here too long. You'll remember what the Moscone nickel is. We're going to increase our contribution on our school meal programs to provide more nutritious meal options and increase participation and access. That Moscone nickel is quite literally 24.45 cents. That's our per meal supplement to the federal government's $2.3 billion contribution. State provides $173 million. It works out to 24.45 cents. We're going to increase that Moscone nickel by 40%. You do the math, but I'll focus on 40% because that sounds better than just saying we're adding a few cents to every meal. But this is a significant expansion, $70 million investment in this space. There's a $60 million component, $10 million component. You can ask me about that, but it's $70 million in this meal space. I also want to acknowledge Jen is going to be leading a task force in this effort. She already's de facto been co-chairing it, working with Kat Steyer and others that have been doing this specialty crop initiative. We're putting an additional $10 million in this farm to school program. Again, just trying to connect our agricultural community to our school districts in a way we haven't in the past. We're very enthusiastic about this, and I'm very grateful to Jen's leadership on this. I'll remind you, this sector of the presentation, there's a $9 billion opportunity. I'm not campaigning for this. I just want to remind people we have a school bond proposal on the capital side that will provide $9 billion in this space. If it's passed, I'm anticipating it's passed. If it does get passed, it's $150 million for lead abatement programs. Got a lot of attention. That's an opportunity. $500 million for career tech. I can continue down the line. You get the thrust of it. It's an incredible opportunity. And it's also an equity-based bond that focuses on the most on high needs areas of our state, and I think provides justice to every tax dollar. And so I just want to acknowledge Representative O'Donnell, Medina, and others, McCarty, for their great leadership on that and their work. We have another agenda that we talked about last year. It's called the Parents Agenda. We've brought in it because we believe deeply that if you're going to support children, you got to support their caregivers. You got to support their parents. You want to support parents that have families, you got to support their children. So we frame it broadly as a parents' agenda. You recall last year we committed to providing universal preschool for all eligible 4-year-olds. We said we would do that over a 3-year period. We made historic investments last year, not only in new slots, but infrastructure. That's both human capital, workforce, and physical capital, actually building out the facilities, leasing the facilities, retrofitting the facilities. We noted last year this is a multi-year effort. Even if we dumped all the money in the world, we couldn't spend it. By the way, boy, was that not an exaggeration, and I'll get to that point. There's still an unprecedented number of dollars that are rolling over. And that just reinforces the fact that we don't want to go slow here. We just want to do this right. It's high quality access to affordable preschool and childcare. Let us not make the mistake of getting ahead of ourselves. Let's do this right and thoughtfully. You'll recall we put a task force. We funded the task force. We got the coalition to end all coalitions participating in this task force. They're laying out a strategy to integrate with our full-day kindergarten programs, our TK programs, to really look at the state infrastructure, build that architecture physically, literally, and also figuratively, and begin that process over the course of the next few years. We also provided in this space last year some collective bargaining support for our child care providers, which will create an advocacy arm in this space, the likes of which we have never seen, which enlivens me and is one of the principal drivers, not only to provide for the investments in supporting our caregivers, disproportionately women of color, to provide equity and support, but also to provide advocacy. We put more money in full-day kindergarten last year, some $300 million. We created this new Surgeon General's office. We are a nation state. We might as well have our own Surgeon General. She's probably the best decision I made last year. Universal approval ratings for our Surgeon General, my wife's old friend, focusing on ACEs. We put $107 million for trauma-informed training up last year. We focused on enhancing and advancing our home visiting Black infant program last year because of incredible leadership of Holly Mitchell. We put a just unprecedented investment in CalWORKs, $157.5 million for stage 2 and 3 supports. We increased our reimbursement rates to 50% of federal poverty. We increased our efforts on paid family leave. Again, the goal is 6 months, went from 6 to 8 weeks. We increased the reimbursement rates, and we did a number of other things. And we created these child savings accounts, which is something I did as mayor of San Francisco, and something, Representative Nazarian and others, Member Nazarian has been an advocate for, and something that we want to continue to expand. But in order to get to where we want to go, we need to do something differently. And that's why this year we want to establish a Department of Early Childhood Development. We have got all of these groups doing great work, but not together. And rather than reading through all of that, this is what we want to consolidate. These are the organizations, the programs, the private, the public, that all need to come under one roof. This is something the advocacy community has been calling for years. We weren't prepared last year to advance it. I wanted to fund this space. And now this year, we're prepared to roll out this program. Talk about efficiency, talk about addressing the issues of fragmentation. And with this, we will also increase investments. We will do our year 2 commitment of the 3-year. We will get all eligible 4-year-olds universal preschool in the state of California. I will stand up here, God willing, this time next year to advance the final 3rd year of investment. Today, we're announcing the second year investment on enhancing those slots. It's slightly more in this space than we put in last year. Last year, it annualized about $127 million. In the budget year, it was 31.4. In the budget year this year, it's 31.9 million. It annualizes north of $130 million for preschool. We're putting additional $75 million in expansion grants for facilities. And we're taking some of this money that we put in. This was the point I made a moment ago about money's not the answer to every problem. It's incredibly important, but it's not in and of itself going to solve problems. Governor Brown put $100 million into full-day kindergarten. I put $300 million with the legislature's augmentations and supports. We want to put a little more. They want to put a little less. Turns out they were right. I was a little exuberant. I'm glad they put less because we couldn't spend a lot. We still have $300 million left of that $400 million. We want to now roll that over and make some of that full-day kindergarten money available for preschools. Why does that matter? Ask Member McCarty why that matters. They're going to, I think, be pleased that we're going to create some flexibility with this money. You'll still have plenty of resources this year, we believe, for full-day kindergarten, but we want to make some more resources available for preschool capital, which I know was an end-of-session issue, and we recognize it as a legitimate issue and want to create some support for it. We're doing $53.8 million of additional support for CalWORks Stage 2 and 3 for childcare. We are going to add additional resources on the cannabis space, which is, as you know, we're using cannabis money to help support childcare. There'll be more cannabis resources this year than last year. For those that believe that that is going backwards, you will be disabused of that later in my presentation, and that is good news from the childcare perspective. There's an additional $10.3 million just from the cannabis fund for additional slots. We're going to add more ACEs screening money, and we are going to address the issue of job protection this year for our for our paid family leave providers. That's something that we were hoping to do last year. We are fortunate that we have teed it up for this year. I think that will be well received by the legislature. We got 6 to 8 weeks. We've got a work group that's going to figure out how to finance the next iteration in stages to ultimately get to that 6-month goal. But in the interim, second-year commitment is job protections now being extended for those, providing caregiving and obviously baby bonding, which is incredibly important. By the way, we put additional money up to help small businesses. There's a grant through the EDD department for small businesses. Because Holly Mitchell would be outside protesting me, I say that lovingly. We do additional resources for CalWORks. Never enough, but additional $98.1 million in CalWORks. There's also some child support collection work that was unfinished from last year. I want to thank the legislature for their work in this space. I heard you. We included some money this year, $17 million in that space as well to address their prioritization, which was wise. On the issue of higher education, we're putting in some $786.8 million of additional resources in higher education. $200 million at the CSU, ongoing to 5% increase, 217.7% at UC, 5% increase. I want to remind folks, I'm actually a current member of the Regions and Board of Trustees. If I were a member of that board, I would need to be reminded of this. Close to 8% and 6.9% increases last year. Those are baked into the baseline, plus an additional 5%. 12+%, not too bad. In fact, I'll put that up against any 24-month higher education budget in modern memory. Is that an overstatement? Broaden that. In memory, in fact. Well, recent memory. I just make that point because I know the appetites of my former colleagues and current colleagues on the UC Regents and CSU Board of Trustees, but that's ongoing money. That's the most important money. We're advancing it. $370 million for community colleges. We are doing a number of things, community college, including developing zero-cost textbooks, providing legal services. Member Rubio and others advocating for Dreamer liaisons, and we include money for that. We want to expand books for dual enrollment. We have enrollment growth projections in there. We're doing some part-time faculty office hour pilots and some other faculty hiring pilots, which I think will be well received. And we're also doing $83.2 million for apprenticeships. I made a commitment, a 10-year commitment, to get 500,000 earn and learn apprenticeships. We had 75,000 when I took the oath of office. Today we're over 93,000 apprenticeships in the state of California. We want to continue down that path. There's $83.2 million in this space. And I say in this space because we want this to be a collaboration with our system of higher education, particularly our community colleges and our workforce development agency. We're also creating an apprenticeship council to really start looking at regional strategies and to build stronger industry partnerships. We're not even close to where we need to be with the private industry to help supplement our efforts. And so this is a collaborative approach. It's one that I think is long overdue. I don't think it gets in anyone's way. It just expands as a circle of opportunity to advance our efforts. On the issue of student loans, we have been meeting with a lot of experts in this space. We have quietly been putting together a work group. I want to formalize the student loan work group to focus on repayment programs, loan forgiveness programs, better notification strategies, and some issues around repayment options. I want to really codify this loose advisory committee that I have and make it more public and real. And I want them to come out with some bold recommendations that we can advance. Legislature may have their specific ideas this year. I look forward to hearing them. In the absence of that, we want to be prepared for next year's budget to do something big in this space. We also provide real money in this space for more outreach, the Student Aid Commission, to connect with those that are currently struggling with debt. Cal Grants, last year we put $96.7 million up. It was part of our parents' agenda to focus on parents with children that are making a go of it and recognize their responsibility not just to themselves but their families to get their own education. That was significant enhancement. We want to add to that with an additional $21.6 million this year. We also want to improve efforts, and that's the reference here, to increasing opportunities in underserved communities. I have been so impressed with this DRIVE coalition out of Fresno, this public-private partnership of the region's leaders. They have put together a remarkable plan. They deserve to have that plan supported, not just rhetorically through a press release or a press conference, but financially. We'll make a down payment on that plan by putting $33 million in to coordinate with UC Merced, and rather UC, Merced, but also Fresno State. We've got partnership with GoBiz, Department of Agriculture. It's an exciting project. If you want to see the details, go online and read their proposal. We also are doing a workforce development plan, $17 million to focus on a K through 16 collaborative with the DRIVE folks to focus on workforce needs. They're underrepresented in terms of number of accountants out there, and teachers and nurses, and we really have a targeted program in that space. By the way, where does that come from? I have a higher education advisory committee. They asked that this be their top priority this year, a demonstration project. And if they can prove it works here in Fresno, then we can go to the Central Coast, inland California, and don't forget the North Coast of California as well. So that's the bucket in higher education. On housing, last year we did something that we have simply not done in the previous years. The budget is not the solution to housing, but the budget can help in this space. Last year we put $1.75 billion for housing production. Let me amend that. We committed $1.75 billion, and it was approved. Not $1 went out in the calendar year. So the good news for those that feel like the status quo is untenable, you're right. And the good news is the money now will start flowing. For those that are interested, I am, so forgive me again, my preamble. I'm going to express that interest publicly. We have $125 million of the $250 million we put up for the cities and counties for technical assistance. Those dollars, the local dollars, go out this month, $125 million of that $250. And then $125 million, the remaining, goes to the regions in February. So those dollars going out in January and February, all $250 million. We did $500 million for this infill grant program. We have $85 million that's over the counter that's available to everybody this January. I say this because if I'm a county person, you should know that, and you should get to that counter and start applying for those dollars. The rest of it, the $410 million, is a competitive process. It goes out this April. It's a big chunk of money going out this April on the infill grant program. Remember, that's for sewers and lighting hookups, roads, sidewalks, and the like. Something when we sued Huntington Beach and those 46 other cities came in saying we'll never meet our housing goals, they said because we can't afford to do it because of our infill needs. That's why we put $500 million up. Those dollars are being made available in January and April. We have $500 million of a low-income tax credit. It was $85 million when I got here. It's $500 million because of the support of the legislature and Phil Ting and a million others upstairs that are now upset I didn't mention them, that advocated for this over the years, but we got it done, and that's for new construction. All those applications are being reviewed, and they go out this year. We also have $500 million loan program. When I got here, it was $43 million. Now it's $500 million. I just want to remind people the work that's being done in this space. Those dollars go out, $200 million of that $500 go out in January, 140 of that's over the counter, 60 million's around innovative housing. People are wondering what we're doing in that space. We're actually subsidizing and strategizing through our loan program strategies to invest in that space. These are, again, loans to developers. And we have $500 million that we put out, just maybe you weren't aware, in November of last year, $500 million went out, the No Place Like Home money. We still have $1.5 billion. That's for supportive housing. That went out. The bond was sold, rather, in November of last year. And then we have the Prop 1 money. That's the $4 billion that was approved by the voters. Those dollars go out, and that's for transit, infill, multi-housing, et cetera. I remind folks what we did on the enhanced infrastructure financing districts. I want to applaud the legislature for supporting those efforts, removing that 55% threshold on voter approval. We enhanced that opportunity, and we want to see more EIFDs throughout the state of California. We did the executive order on excess state properties, which was important, and you saw a new executive order went out on homelessness that is fast-tracking with more intentionality our efforts in that space, and I'm happy to amplify. We are this year leading an effort to do more to prepare sites for development. We're going to focus on accountability. We're going to focus on pre-zoning and pre-clearance. We've got new RFPs coming out on excess lands. As you know from last year's presentation, we're refining the $3.5 million goal. I hope we start seeing that represented, that goal is being refined. That $3.5 million goal was a stretch goal. We said last year in the budget that we're going to materialize that goal at a regional basis through the RENA process. We're moving from the 5th to the 6th RENA cycle that ends the calendar year of 2022. Those numbers are coming in real time. You saw the SCAG numbers coming in as one example. I think it was 1.35 million units. Those become now new targets, new goals, and the sum total of that will be that new $3.5 million goal in terms of how we actually implement by region, more prescriptively, more strategically. I also put together this new kitchen cabinet. We're going to have some new announcements on personnel. I've just had enough with TCAC and SIDLAC and OPRs and CalVets and HCDs and CalHFAs. 6 of you understand what the hell I just said. No one else does, and that's the point. You got all this money. You got all this roadblocks. It's time to get the SIDLACs working with the TCACs and the HFAs. And that just requires leadership, and we're driving that leadership. That's about, that's just good governance, and that's about distributing funding and technical assistance. We also are moving forward with fee transparency. As you know, with the school bond, not advocating pro or con, we have some fee reforms that were included in that school bond. We believe we need more fee reform in this space. I know there's legislative leadership in this space. I want to applaud that, and we're committed to that. Please ask me about redevelopment because I have an answer, and I'm happy to go into details. But I think it's important to know this year $6.8 billion is being invested in this space on housing, because I'm not sure that's often reported or even known. $6.8 billion. I could break that down and I can answer the redevelopment question in a way that I think it deserves to be answered, and that is honestly, not ideologically. On the issue of homelessness, we're investing over $1 billion yet again to address the issue that defines our times. The new numbers that came out are from last year. The new numbers that showed a 16.5% increase, 150 plus thousand people in the state of California, not all living out on the streets and sidewalks, some sheltered, most unsheltered. Those numbers are from last January. Those are numbers we inherited. Those are the numbers I now hold myself to a high level of accountability to address. You saw an executive order last week. I don't need to go into details of that in terms of our intentionality in this space. You recall we put $650 million of emergency grants in last year to help support the cities and the counties. Cities got $275 million, counties $175, the COCs got $190 million. We also did legal aid, SSI advocacy. We did some child welfare support, student rapid rehousing, $52.9 million for student rapid rehousing. And we also put $265 million behavioral health budget last year. So we had about $1 billion last year. We're doing that and some more in this year's budget. But we are doing something else, and it's consistent with my comments on housing. That money, the $650 million, like the housing money, hasn't gone to the cities and counties yet. It's now being distributed. The money is going out as we speak. In the next weeks and months, those grants are going out. This is unprecedented in California's history. I applaud previous administration in their last year for stepping up, but we need to get to the next level. Last year we did. We're getting to a whole new level this year. We can talk about the trailers and the medical tents we're putting out, and those will be out mostly by March as temporary strategies and solutions, but we need to focus on permanency. But that means consolidating investments, integrating our efforts. It means regionalizing our administration. I don't want to just have that as a tagline anymore. I want to codify that. And it means more accountability. Accountability at the local level, not just at the state level. We're many parts but one body. 58 counties, 480 cities, plus or minus. And so we thought this year we want to do a little differently by creating a $750 million housing and services fund managed by the Department of Social Services. Focuses on a single place within regions with these regional administrators to focus on linkages, rental subsidies, case management, support our board and care homes, rapid rehousing, job training, integrating with the CalAIM program I'll talk about in a moment, enhancing and advancing these 100-day plans, which we've been talking about the last few months, making sure those $650 million of emergency grants are being well invested and amplified. We're going to engage landlords directly. We have never done this in the past. We believe this is the first in the nation state-based housing investment vehicle of its type. It is a novel strategy. It's a new strategy, and it's not without its pratfalls. It's not without its administrative hurdles. So I'm not here to suggest we'll snap our fingers and overnight we'll have a new vehicle and everybody will integrate their strategies. It's going to be a multi-year effort to display, I think, a different level of discipline and muscle memory and build-up to begin to leverage each other as opposed to leverage from each other more resources, but to force and compel partnerships and capacity building. A big part of that is the CalAIM program, of which $285 million will be in the behavioral health space that will be targeted with more precision to the issue of homelessness. And again, I keep previewing that. I think it's time to now talk about that in its relationship to the issue of housing. We are focused on a once-in-a-lifetime, well, maybe my lifetime, not some of the younger people here, opportunity to transform the Medi-Cal system. And I brought on Mark Galley for one purpose, besides his personality, which is very amenable. He's here. It is his expertise. He has city and county expertise, but he's also an intellect. He's an academic, but he's a practitioner. And he has spent the last 9 months, in fact, this was his interview. He said, I'm not interested in this unless you're interested in innovation and transformation. I'm not here to add 10% to the budget, 3%. He says, I want to change the incentives because I know how the incentives work and I know how they don't work. I want to integrate mental health, substance abuse. I want a behavioral health mindset. I want to focus on wellness and prevention. I want to focus on recuperative care. I want to focus on driving more Medi-Cal dollars, which is Medicaid dollars, to housing, rapid rehousing, to subsidies. I want to focus on the chronic, the high utilizers. I want to reduce costs, take those savings, and amplify programs like whole person care that are working. I want to do whole person care on steroids, a word shouldn't have used as a medical professional, but nonetheless, a point of emphasis that we want to take whole person care and expand it statewide. All of that made sense to me, and the good news, it's being socialized with all of the tectonic plates of influencers in the state, and most are favorably receptive to it. They want to see more details, and so do all of you, and that's the job of the next number of months, to flesh this out, to work with the legislature and advance this new national model. If we do this right, no one in the United States will have done something as transformative as this. You want to ask about what we're doing on behavioral health, mental health? This is it. You want to talk about what we're doing on substance abuse? This is it. You want to talk about reform at the county level and accountability, transparency? This is it. You want to talk about stabilizing high utilizers and addressing the issue of homelessness and housing? This is it. And you also want to talk about wellness centers and schools? It's also part of this effort as well. Partnerships, capacity building. We're going to submit our request to the federal government, because this requires not just support of the legislature, it requires a waiver from the Trump administration. It's called the 1915B waiver. For the two of you in this room, that we're happy to hear that. It is not an 1115 waiver. That's the past. This is a 1915B waiver. That's the future. And we're investing $348 million of general fund in this space, $695 million overall in this space, in this budget. I can regale you about the work we did on Medi-Cal last year with Prop 56 monies and all the reimbursement enhancements, the loan repayments of $120 million. I just want to remind you of all of those things because they're important. A lot of those bleed into this new year. We're building on all of those things. Though I will say, for those that are interested, Prop 656 is a declining revenue source. That's the whole point. You want to increase tobacco taxes. The idea is to reduce consumption. We're going to backfill some of those losses, particularly for the Song Brown program, other programs that we think are top priorities, but we project a 3.9% reduction in Prop 60 or 56 money in this year's budget. We also want to talk more broadly about behavioral health because we're going after parity. Mark my words, DHMC is getting in the business of real enforcement, not tacit enforcement. I want to prepare folks for some high-profile fines. They will do their job. I don't need legislation to do that. I don't need, be encouraged to do that. They just need to do their damn job, and they need to go aggressively on parity. We've been talking about this for too many years, and I am saying this looking in one of these damn cameras because there are folks out there that are not doing the right thing, and they will be fined, and they will be held accountable, and I will deeply highlight their lack of accountability in this space. And so we are going aggressively on the parity issue. It is a mandate and a mission for my team over there, and I just want to applaud them for recognizing the imperative. We want to reform Prop 63. I can get in the Q&A about some of our thoughts. We've been working with Darryl Steinberg. It's inspiration. We've got a team, Tom Inzel, as you know, we hired, used to run Obama's mental health work. They've been mocking up some ideas. It's not just, we just want to clarify it. We want to focus it. We also want to get more serious about this reversion policy. We still have people sitting on a lot of reserves. Last reserve number I have is $539 million of reserves folks are sitting on. They're not spending. We believe conservatively 161 million of that is imprudent. They need to spend it, or we're going to revert those dollars back to the state and reinvest it. But we're going to get more aggressive in that space. That's an administrative function, but it's also reform. So it's not just legislative reform. It's not just ballot reform, though everything's on the table, but it is reform. We want to focus more acuity on homelessness, the justice system, first episode psychosis for youth and young adults, and workforce. That's the mantra coming from Darrell Steinberg, Mayor Steinberg, and Tom Insel, and they're right, and we want to reinforce that. We're going to have a new work group that's going to work on that, and we're going to look at the Landrum-Petras Short Act. And look, I'm a civil libertarian, and I'm deeply sensitive to about the civil liberties issues, and I'm going to maintain that sensitivity. I'm not here to alarm anybody. I'm not here to enliven, or rather create anxiety. I am here to enliven. That act was conceived when I was conceived. And the world's changed, including me. And I just think we need to meet the conditions that exist today. And so we're leaning into that. You're going to ask me what specifically. I'm going to hew and haw, try to misdirect you. You'll be left wanting, but that's intentional because we are working through the details of this, and it's tough stuff. And in fact, my staff said, we hope you don't bring that up today. But I felt it necessary to bring it up because I just want folks to know where I am on this, and know that also just ties into Cal-AIM as well. I'm so proud of our work in this space, healthcare. No state did what we did last year. I know, some folks are just in the business of focusing on small things, but we're doing big things. And I say that to make this point. Last year, there was so much attention given to expansion, regardless of your immigration status, 0 to 26. We were proud of that. But that was not what we did last year. We did the biggest, deepest dive subsidies for the middle class of any state in American history. We deepened subsidies for people earning 250 to 400%. We expanded subsidies for families earning up to $150,000. That's folks earning up to 600% of federal poverty. No one did what we did. Covered California had less than 1% inflationary growth in terms of costs. No one does what Peter Lee does. I'm really proud of their work. I'm proud of the work of this state. We made progress on Prop 56. We made progress on prescription drugs. I'm going to talk more about that. We deepened those subsidies. We focused on value-based payments and mental health and workforce. This year, we got to get serious about reducing healthcare costs in a much more transparent and meaningful way. When I talk about transparency, we mean transparency. More data. We want more options for coverage. We want to reduce costs of care. And that's why we think it's important we create this new Office of Healthcare Affordability that will do much of this. There's been a lot of consolidation with providers. There's a lot of regional disparities in terms of costs. We're going to highlight those regional disparities. We're going to create specific cost targets for all sectors to achieve. And we are going to assess penalties if they don't achieve those targets. If that didn't wake up members of the system, I don't know what will. Now, that's rhetoric. I hope it not bluff. And it's incumbent upon all of us to truly architect that strategy. But I'm showing you what the intention is, and I'm letting you know based on what we did last year, we mean business. We made a lot of progress last year, and we're going to make progress on this year. We have a public option. Just so folks know, California has a public option. It's called Color California. It has public health plans, Color California, and of course, Medi-Cal. We just want to strengthen our public option. And so we have a lot of work that we're doing in that space to expand eligibility and create more opportunities. Very excited about this. I keep looking over there to Mark Alley. That's why he's here, because he's a big part of this budget presentation. We are signaling in this document our intention to go after surprise billing. I'm not holding if you're going to ask me where I am on, was it 1161 choose bill? Maybe I'm not 1611, not 1161, proving the dyslexia. I am not committed myself to that bill. I'm not but I'm committed to the spirit of those efforts. And I just want to make it clear that we need to do more in that space, and we are committed through our trailer bill process to do that. The blanks will be filled in over the course of the next few months. We've been mocking some of that up. That, by the way, is something they also didn't want me to talk about today because they knew you'd ask prescriptive, specific questions, but know that we are leaning in and hold me to account. We're expanding coverage, regardless of your immigration status, for all of those 65 and over. We believe in universal health care. We believe that universal health care lowers costs for everybody. We believe the evidence bears that out. We believe it's the right thing to do morally and ethically. We also believe it is the financially responsible thing to do. Some don't believe in doing the financially responsible thing. Some don't believe in the morality and ethics of allowing people to die on the streets and sidewalks, or, God forbid, get the flu and then allow you to get the flu because we didn't invest in a flu shot. I would prefer to invest in the flu shot. I would prefer to invest in keeping people out of emergency rooms. I would prefer to spend less money and do the right thing. So I am proud to support that expansion, and I want to thank, from Razzo to Rambula and other members upstairs that have been fierce advocates on this. They deserve credit. But also note, when I was mayor, we did this. I made a commitment. We're following through. And you'll ask me, what about everybody else? And I will caution you, that is a huge price tag on the front end that right now we cannot absorb, but we can build on last year's work. Interestingly, that's $64.2 million. I can't wait to see some reporting suggesting it's the entire $222 billion budget. It's $64.2 million in this year's budget. If you are curious, it will annualize at 320 general fund. That's 27,000 people that we project, but that's a moving target. You've seen 25,700. I saw another report that was 28,000. I'm offering today's number, 27,000. Prescription drugs, we did a lot of work last year on a single purchasing plan. We did pay for delay strategies, more transparency on increases. We did a lot on that bulk purchasing that we anticipated would save us $393 million. Here's the good news. We think we'll save $456.6 million in the out years, not $393. That includes, by the way, 340B savings. For the two of you in this room that are curious about 340B, and those watching at home that are impacted by this, we are going to invest $105 million to deal with 340B clinics' loss of revenue. So that should address Member Pan's concerns. Many of the community clinics, invariably there'll be an article saying, well, we're not sure that's enough. We anticipate that, but we committed last year to work with the clinics. That commitment now is demonstrable. $52.5 million will be the general fund component on an ongoing basis of that $105 million contribution. We believe as a nation state, fifth largest economy on the planet, that we could do more on prescription drug prices beyond just being a single purchaser. We believe we can get in the business of generics. We can brand through California RX, our generic drugs program. We are already in active conversation with some of the major purchasers in this state. And forgive me in advance for not getting the details of the negotiations. One guarantee of this not working is telling you who we're negotiating with. But I can assure you things like insulin are top of mind in terms of that prescription generic program and its strategy. We're building partnerships, and we will have a detailed spring proposal on this that needs legislative support. We're also doing things on best prices, both not just nationally, but we're going to move a best price Medi-Cal proposal that looks at international best pricing. What we call the Golden State Drug Pricing Schedule also will be advanced, which will be a single price schedule for everybody. That is very exciting and very controversial. We'll continue our work at the state and county level on prescription drugs, getting everybody to pool their purchases with ours and significantly drive down prescription drugs. I just don't know of a state doing more on this than the state of California. We have a unique responsibility to show the way, and I'm very, very enthusiastic about what we're doing. We'll continue our work on Alzheimer's and cognitive care. We're going to increase our developmental services provider rates. Last year, the DDS rates increased $413.3 million. This year, we're adding an additional $96 million on top of the 413.3, so we're close now to $500 million. I recognize that we have a gap from that study. We still have more work to do in this space. I'm very clear-headed about that, but I want folks to know we're making progress. An area that I care deeply about, and you should care deeply about if you care about the issues of homelessness and those that are struggling, is incompetent to stand trial, the IST community. We've got a 6-year pilot. We've been working on this for months. We're going to fund that pilot with close to $25 million. And we have got some work at Porterville we'll be doing and some off-ramp services working with the counties, and we're funding those efforts to tune of an additional 16, 17 million. By the way, just on the MCO tax, I may not have finished that segment. We project we'll receive $1.2 billion in 21-22. That's why it's not included in our budget. The full $1.9 billion, remember it's a 3-year tax, $1.9 billion is its annualized cost. That won't be included until 22-23. That's the reason we could not in good conscience include it. I just want to make that clear. We've already submitted to CMS our documents. I think we did that last September. And we're working hard to get that done. We'll get it done. And that is the long update. I will briefly condense the rest and go through a number of issues. We're going to support a vaping tax. If you say you got us on a tax increase, you got us on this tax increase, the vaping tax. It's going to be a $2 for each 40 milligram of nicotine tax. $2 for each 40 grams of nicotine tax. Basically the equivalency of cigarettes with these nicotine cartridges. It will generate, it's very difficult. I hesitate to give you our estimates on revenue. It's in the tens of millions of dollars, but because of the legislative cycle, it's a half-year estimate, but it's in the tens of millions. If you want a number, go with 32-ish, but it could be 70, it could be 20. It's just, it's an estimate. But we are moving forward with that, and we're going to do more than the federal government did on the flavors. And I just want to thank Jerry Hill and everybody else upstairs for their leadership on this. Just know I'm all in for what they're doing. I talked about economic growth, economic expansion. We need to talk more about inclusion. It's growth and inclusion. Growth without inclusion is a society, a 2-class society, not a 3-class society, and we're increasingly moving to a 3-class society, losing our middle class. We increase the minimum wage, and I know you say that's perfunctory. I want to remind you the governor has the authority to limit that minimum wage increase on an annual basis. We moved forward with that minimum wage increase. As you know, $13 is not representative of what every county does. Cities like San Francisco and others have been at 15 for years, 15 phases in, assuming economic conditions hold 2022, 2023. We also have put that $1 billion to play on the EITC. It's just simply no other state in America has increased their earned income tax credit, their working families tax credit. And it's just an important thing to highlight. We still are working to get that monthly. The problem is we need Congress to adopt legislation and the president to sign it in order to allow that. I can get into the details of that, but we are working hard on that. We also want to do a tax cut for small businesses. That's how I started. Started as a small business person with one part-time employee, Pat Kelly. We grew that business to over 700 employees all throughout the state of California. I'm proud of that work. I remember, I'll never forget, getting that big $800 bill as a brand new business and going, does the state of California even care about what we're doing? That was one of those bills that goes to your gut and you almost start tearing up because you don't know how the hell you're going to pay for it. So we want to do an exemption on the first year of that minimum franchise tax. It's a $100 million commitment to small businesses to encourage LLCs, non-corporations, partnerships to get that same 1-year exemption. So that's included in this budget as well. We're also putting more support and enforcement under AB 5. I will remind you, AB 5 was state law before AB 5 was a state legislative effort. Dynamex was state law when the California Supreme Court advanced it. The codification of it was AB 5. There are a lot of amendments, a lot of movements. I imagine many of those will continue apace, anew, into the new year. A lot of litigation, obviously, in the space. But my job as executive is to enforce the law and to support Julie Sue and her great team that is overwhelmed by workload and investigations. We're going to provide $17.5 million to help them in this space. But we also want to help businesses understand it. We have a new website. We have a new FAQ site, frequently asked questions, so people can get the benefit of that as well. And I want to thank Assemblywoman Gonzalez and Member Carla and others. They've been very active in this space and deserve enormous credit for advancing it, but we have a lot more work to do. Please ask me if you wish more thoughts on that in the future. GoBiz as well. It's going to focus on Inland Empire. We're going to provide some more positions, Central Valley, North Coast, Central Coast. We're committed to this Regions Rising Together construct. We're creating a new Financial Protections Bureau. This is a big deal. Again, nation state, fifth largest economy on planet Earth, running record reserves, ongoing surpluses. Contrast that to the Trump administration's record deficits. No reserves. They're getting out of the financial protection business. We're getting into it. So we're going to change DBO, the Department of Business Oversight. We're going to rename it to Financial Protection and Innovation. It's going to be about facilitating new innovation, fintech, others, but also about enforcement, expanding scope and tools to go after debt collectors, to go after payday lenders and the like. We're going to resource it with a $29.2 million 2-year commitment, or at least that's about 18 months, 44 positions, new year, 90 positions. We're going to protect consumers from unfair and deceptive practices better than we have. I don't want to overstate this, but we're excited about it. Trump's pulling away, state's asserting itself. We care about parks. I do. We don't talk about parks enough. We should. Trivia, the last state park that was procured by the people of the state of California that was north of 45,000 acres was what year? 1944. I hope I'm right about that, because that would be embarrassing. We are poised to make up for that. And we have put money in this year's budget. I can't identify the park because then the price goes up. So just know we're in the process of procuring a new park. Remember, parks are the lungs of our communities. We also want to democratize access to the parks. And I know Member Lamone and others have been working on this outdoor education grant program. We're going to put $20 million in that space. We're going to do some free passes. Low-income pass program is going to be significantly expanded. There are a lot of other investments in state parks, but we're very, very excited about the work we're doing here, including $35 million Tijuana River, including $18 million on the new river to deal with the solid waste issues around the city of Calexico. Pollution capture devices at Tijuana River. This is exciting. You've got the new MCA or whatever, NAFTA slightly changed, so Trump feels better legislation, but they added a few $100 million in that space. We got there was a $6 million appropriation. I think Feinstein or others got that, and then we're putting another $35 million. So it's stacking up real focus and energy on those issues. We're putting $66 million. Again, this may not be big ball for some, but I think it's really important. Protecting fish and wildlife. We're putting more money in this urban flood risk reduction program, $66 million in general fund, $35 million in this water resiliency portfolio projects. You saw we put out that water resiliency portfolio plan. We want to start financing some of the projects. We got over $257 million of Prop 98, or rather 68 money that'll be rolling out in this year's budget. And we also did something very meaningful on the local groundwater management. $60 million we're putting up to deal with SGMA. This is money I don't think people expected. Grant programs, technical programs, very important to provide technical assistance to agencies for SGMA. I'll mention them at peril of really losing. I've lost 90% of you, but I think it's important. We put some real. I live near a fish hatchery. Perhaps that's why it's in the budget. We've got millions of dollars for fish hatchery improvements and wetlands improvements, toxics, chemicals, biodiversity. This IPMS, I was involved in integrated pest management as a mayor. We're putting money in this space. All this is in the category of Trump doesn't care, but California does. I could talk more about that. It's exciting. Speaking of which, climate. He's in denial. I mean, it's just jaw-dropping, his ignorance, arrogance perhaps, on this, but ignorance first and foremost about the hot's getting hotter, the dry's getting drier, the wet's getting wetter, the wind's getting windier. Climate change is real. California's Green New Deal has been long underway. I know we've got contemporary consideration to amend it, but I want to help fund those amendments. And so this year, we have laid out a $12.5 billion 5-year commitment to climate resiliency. Included in this is that $4.75 billion resiliency bond that's in our budget package. We are hoping to get that on the ballot. 62% of that's for flood, drought, and drinking water. And by the way, what an incredible effort. Thank you to the leadership upstairs for getting that safe drinking water initiative done. That was heroic. We should be proud of that. We want to build on that with this resiliency bond. We have $965 million. This year, $965 million in cap and trade. It's 4.8 over, again, a 5-year period. The reason it was higher last year, as you recall, we spent down some of our reserves. We want to create, I appreciate Cal Manners had a nice piece today, an explainer on the Climate Catalyst Fund. This is very exciting, and this goes to, I know that Bonta, others had a press conference. People say, well, how are they going to fund it? Well, this is a way of helping fund some of those Green New Deals. This Catalyst Fund provide $1 billion over the next few years. We are going to provide 0 low-interest loans. I've talked a lot on the campaign trail. Most of you may have missed it about the iBank. Been long thinking about how we can make the iBank more meaningful. We want to utilize the iBank as the vehicle for these revolving loan funds. Focus on smart ag, focus on sustainable food processing, focusing on methane capture. You get the gist of where we want to go. $250 million is included in this year's budget. We want to deal, I know Member Garcia and others have been talking about DTS reform, fee reform, and also backfilling some of their deficits. We have some money in this budget that goes under the climate and natural resource bucket. CalGEM, which was Dogger. I think Wade Crowfoot said we went from a dog to a gem. But the only way you can go from a dog to a gem is you got to invest in the gem and polish it. That's the $24.3 million enhancement. Only 63% of our activities, 68% of our activities are currently being enforced. This will get us to 100%. Focus on decommissioning, support plugging and abandonment, strengthening and streamlining our regulatory structure. All of you are interested, as you should be, in wildfires and the issues associated with preparedness. This year's budget includes $814.4 million, both picking up from last year and new money. In addition to that is $200 million in the cap and trade. So again, north of $1 billion for emergency preparedness and wildfires. It's $465.4 in the base, $349 million of new general fund. That's new positions on surge capacity, $110 million for structural hardening. We have got Senator Dodd's new integrated center for wildfire forecasting. That's his weather data program. This budget, we've got $50 million for PSPS, but we want to rename it to Community Power Resiliency since we want to broaden the state's contribution in that space. We're adding an additional $17.3 million for our earthquake warning system. That's on the operational side. I also want to move that Seismic Safety Commission under OES. That's a reform. There's some dollars attached to that. And we're going to do a research grant. This is important, CAL FIRE in particular. These guys are out there doing heroic work, all the chemicals and smokes in the forests. We want to do a research proposal, or want to advance one with Cal State San Marcos. We put money in the budget for that. I think it's just important to highlight that because they're important to highlight. And we are supporting our firefighters, CAL FIRE in particular, in unprecedented ways in this budget. $80 million additional enhancement for LIDAR. I could talk to you about what LIDAR is, what it isn't, but that's also money that we are including in the budget. Remember, we did Blackhawks, C-130s, we did new innovation sprint, new cameras. All those things are part of the baseline that we're continuing into the new year. We don't have to do the 911 this year because we substantially addressed that last year with the fee. PSPS will not be as high as it was the previous year, and a lot of those PSAs we don't need to be advanced as ongoing. Issues of public safety. I want to close the state prison. We're going to close the state prison in high time we do it. I want to happen on my watch. I hope my watch extends around 2023. Some say it may take till 2024. I should say 2022, so we can get it done in 2023. Let's just say between 2022 and 2024, we want to get a state prison closed. Why do I give you a moving number? Because it's a moving target daily. We've got to hit that 137.5%. That's court mandated on our prison population, but we've gone from that peak around 167. We've dropped that down significantly. We're hoping to get an average daily run around 123 plus or minus 1,000. If we can do that and stabilize that, and we don't have these tough on crime initiatives that created the problem in the first place, I think we may be in a position to shut down these contract facilities. Remember, we cut down that last out-of-state private prison. That was the right thing to do. We've got 6 private contracts. 3 are public, 3 are private, I should say. We have 3 contracted prisons, to be more precise. We are projecting that we can close 4 of those 6 in this budget in its forecast period that I've included, primarily the male facilities. I could talk to you about where they are in McFarland, Adelanto, but you can ask me about that. And we have a strategy and a plan to shut down a prison, and that's enlivening, and that's a big part of our focus and our commitment. We also want to transform prison life. It's a wonderful piece on NPR today about the work we want to do at Chowchilla and the prison there, and completely reimagine it. More of a Norwegian model, more of a Delancey Street model, more of a Lancaster model as it relates to work they're doing on higher education. We have proposals to transform prison life that includes a new youth offenders program where we're going to start clustering our 5,800 youth, those under the age of 25, and then lock them in with mentors, lifers in some cases that are good behavior, teach these guys how we can improve their lives. These are campus-style environments. We're going to have 10 sites to advance this. Deep dive in academic commitments, partnerships with community college, procurement. And this will be interesting, and I'll throw it out because when you don't have a story, you may want to run with this. What's that 40,000 laptops you talked about? Ask me about it, maybe talk to your editors about it. That's a story when we do it. Higher education, we've got partnerships with Stanislaus and CSU in Fresno that we're going to be putting on a number of these prisons. We're going to extend inmate visitation. Currently, it's just Saturday, Sunday. You want to get serious about bonding, recidivism, reentry. More visitations, incredibly important. We're going to extend these on Fridays at 9 institutions. We've got officer training, $21.4 million of professional development. One of the great things we're doing is Northern California's women facilities. We're in Stockton. We're going to completely redo this and renovate it and have real life experience on the correctional training. Eventually, I want to provide some child care. This is preview. We're not there yet. We got to get more women. Talk about disparities in pay in the state of California. It's primarily driven, a lot of things, but substantively, I should say, it's because of law enforcement sector, we are underrepresented women, particularly in corrections. If you have a young child, how do you do these training programs? How do you do those multi-week things without support and child care? This facility eventually could provide that. We don't have the money this year's budget. Maybe the legislature want to prioritize that, but in the future, that's something we look forward to doing. We're going to enhance our video surveillance program to 3 new facilities, and we're going to hire at HHS a new reentry coordinator throughout the state. We've got some reforms on probation. I think probation should be no more than 2 years max, not 5 years for felonies. And I believe for misdemeanors, it should be no more than 2 from 3 years. This will be controversial because it's a change. But why do I believe that? It's because the data and the evidence and the science bears out. You front load services, those first 18 months are determinative. The back end, the long tail, is not so determinative. Yet it costs money, and for small little petty things, you throw people back into the system, and yet that cycle of violence perpetuates itself. But here's the exciting news. We're going to put more money to front load on adult probation, and then we're going to take some of this SB 678 program, and we're going to use that model for adults for misdemeanors. And this is exciting. We're going to put an unprecedented amount of money to focus on intensive services for people that are misdemeanors on the probation system. This goes directly to the car break-ins. This goes to the petty crime issue. This should be celebrated by the law enforcement community because of the intensity of services we want to provide in this space. I'm really excited about this. It'll be a wonderful debate upstairs. We put $60 million just for the enhancements of services for misdemeanors in that front-loaded framework. We're putting money in for indigent defense, more money, which is important. We've got $92.2 million for fees and fines to backfill. There's 4 key areas for fees and fines. This is an area that's getting a lot of attention upstairs. I want to compliment Member Stone, Mitchell, and others. We'll backfill losses already at Judicial Council, but also DOJ and their DNA program. But $92.2 million is included in that. We're putting also $50.1 million in cybersecurity. I can break that down talking about staffing at the Integration Center, but that is also important. It's been self-evident, highlighted with what's going on in Iran, Russia, and on your own personal devices. Cannabis. Some of you came just for that. We're going to create a new Department of Cannabis. We're going to consolidate the Bureau of Cannabis Control, Department of Public Health functions, Food and Ag functions, bring them all under one roof. Joan Sawyer, and Bradford, others, been talking about this, McGuire for some time. I thank them for that. We're projecting $550 million of revenue next year in the Cannabis Fund. This year, we had projected $434 million. I don't know why. I read often that somehow we've fallen short of our projections. I don't know who we are. I was a proponent of the initiative. We said it would take 5 to 7 years to get close to that $1 billion. We're marching in that direction. It's plus or minus, but there's sort of a sentiment out there that somehow we're slipping on this. I don't see it. And I think the new numbers are going to come in for the fiscal year. They're going to come in closer to $479 million, which is above our projections last year. So I feel confident we can get to $550 million in the new year. By the way, $332 million of that, $479, is being invested back into our programs for children, youth, and family, open space, and the like. So it's exactly what we said we were going to do. We're doing it. Just because I have to, DMV, we're not walking away. I know, we have these politicians that want to have a press conference, walk away, but this is important. We got new leadership. Steve's doing a great job. Finally taking credit cards, not everywhere, but someplace. We went from 130 minutes when the world came to an end and the sky fell and everybody upstairs was screaming and yelling for good reason. We're down to 33 minutes. Anyone happy about that? No. Is that spiking the ball? No. Is there a mission accomplished sign? Absolutely not. Am I eyes wide open on the Real ID program coming in October? Absolutely. Are you excited to write about the stress around that? Of course you are. And so that is anticipated, and here we have a new website and a chat box to address the Real ID program. We are annualizing over $200 million of last year's commitment in this space. We are serious about the reforms at the DMV. We're serious about continuing to advance those reforms. And I just want you to know that I'm really proud of the new leadership team. I'm proud of the men and women at the DMV. And you know what? They get their teeth kicked in a lot, but they're doing a really wonderful job under difficult circumstances. I know it's a tough institution to change, and I know it's a retail face of government. I know all of us are frustrated by the status quo, but some progress is being made. We're not giving up on that progress, including, by the way, $200 million of additional IT procurement that we're going to invest in this space. Briefly, and we are done. Veterans, we're going to do more resource investment in our Yountville, Barstow, and Chula Vista sites. Arts Council is going to continue to get significant increases in revenue. We're going to continue to invest in our Cal Volunteer program. We believe in what we'll eventually call our Shriver program. My hero is Sarge Shriver. It's about amplifying the energies, communities, and we've got a great new leader in Josh Friday who's there. And I want to thank Archuleta, by the way, on the veterans work. He deserves tremendous credit as chair to push us on some of these reforms. Final thing, for those that love pets, those that don't, we want to be a no-kill state. We believe we can make progress on that over a 5-year period. We want to end euthanizations for dogs and cats. We've got a partnership with UC Davis. We want to invest $50 million in that space. That's important to many people. It's important to our family, I imagine to your family as well. We have programs and investments in CalFresh that we're going to make to support our food stamp programs, which are important. And we will enhance and advance our 5-year infrastructure program this year. It totals $53.3 billion, 76% of it in the transportation sector. I might as well have just included this in the climate sector because 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions come in that transportation sector. We are linking, as you know, locking in gas tax dollars as prescribed by the voters. Anyone who says otherwise is, I think, intentionally misdirecting, locking those dollars in, but also beginning an integration on our low-carbon green growth strategies with our infrastructure investments. And you'll see a lot of language in our plan in that space. That concludes. No one more happy than seems my wife. That concludes the briefing. And I want to just thank everybody and just reiterate final few points. Resiliency, reserves, one-time money, disproportionately being used for one-time investments, building on historic reserves, prudence, caution always, but also investments, investing in our growth, unprecedented in wildfire, homelessness, issues related to affordability in healthcare, and obviously education, and progress that we really want to start seeing in our K through 12 education system, and the efforts to double down on that as I think the top priorities and takeaways from this presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
You know, homelessness is the issue we've been taking the most heat on. With this $1 billion investment now, what can you tell Californians, when can you project to Californians that they will see a measurable decline in the number of encampments in their cities? That's one thing that people are asking you about.
I'm not the mayor of California, I'm the governor of California. And we need to advance partnerships in collaboration with our cities and counties. We need more transparency and accountability at all levels, including the federal government, to ultimately answer that. But here's the good news. The state of California has, with respect, not been focused on the issue of homelessness over the last decade, 2 decades, many decades. Last year, we focused an unprecedented amount of attention, mind share, and money in this space. The money is finally going out January and February in this year. Unprecedented amount of money going out to address the issues of rental subsidies, board and care facility concerns, rapid rehousing, behavioral health, opening up slots, making slots available, address subsidies as it relates to vouchers, addressing motel-hotel conversions. The ability to amplify what's working at scale now presents itself in a way that's never been the case in the past. That's the $1 billion from last year. That's $650 million specifically on the emergency grants. Then you have all the housing money. I gave you the details of when those dollars go out. And then my desire to create this fund through some urgency legislation that would then provide the ability to take additional $750 million and get it out in July, August, and September and not wait till next year. So I think you'll start seeing real progress over the course of the next number of months. But as you know, my executive order, we are going out. We have identified state excess properties. We've got these mobile tents, mobile medical units, these old FEMA trailers. You'll see those out in March of this year specifically. You'll see some out as early as next week. And you're going to see a lot more energy, more than you've ever seen in this space in this coming calendar year.
Governor, a follow-up on that topic. Have you had any conversations with the federal government about homelessness assistance issues? And secondarily, the president's been pretty critical of you and the state and suggested he may need to come in and do something extraordinary. Can you talk about that?
I can't. I don't. He tweeted about that. We've had a lot of correspondence back and forth. He's tweeting, we're doing something. We have real plans, real strategies. We've laid them out in very prescriptive, detailed terms. We're hitting all levels. We're working with what we know works. We're building on what works. We don't need him to identify this problem. I stood here last year, identified this as the top priority. We funded it with an unprecedented amount of money and real energy at the local level. We created this advisory committee. We've got senior level administrative staff on this. I've all but taken the mantle of being the homeless czar in the state. In fact, you want to know who the homeless czar is? I'm the homeless czar in the state of California. And we put out an executive order. We're going to start hitting on all cylinders.
Do you want help from the federal government, though? Just
Well, I think you know that because we've written a number of letters that we made public, laying out in detailed terms the most important thing the federal government can do is to address the fair market rent issue on the housing choice vouchers and VASH vouchers. Cost of living in California is such that the value of the vouchers is inadequate to meet the rental needs, and that's why a lot of the vouchers are unused.
And have you heard
Their
anything back from
ability
them?
to address, they did a very public response to that, and I'll provide you a copy of that, and you'll see their response. We're not waiting. We don't need Donald Trump. We'd like to get more support, but we are moving aggressively.
The $750 million that you've proposed for homelessness funds going more locally, you called what you're proposing kind of a radical shift in the state's role of doling out those funds. Traditionally, cities and counties have handled those funds and received those funds.
Yeah.
Is there, why are you deciding to change that?
I continue to do what you've done, you'll get what you got. I can't perpetuate the status quo any longer. I work with the cities and counties, the big 13. We gave them the flexibility they wanted. I told you the CACs, the counties, the money we gave, the emergency grants, we're getting those out to them. But we have to regionalize our administration. And I don't think this, I know this. I spent 20 years in this space. I know there's a lot of folks that cite, academic studies or researchers. I've been a practitioner in this space. We need to regionalize our strategies, but that will not happen unless the state codifies those from a legislative construct and then finances those accordingly. And that's what these regional administrators are all about. And it's about forcing collaboration at the regional level.
Concern in cities like LA that have created really coordinated responses to the homelessness crisis, that perhaps it could continue to or go back to a world where there's more silos among those programs. Is there?
It's the exact opposite.
Okay.
What we're proposing is quite literally exactly the opposite. It's to force further collaboration, to build on that city-county collaboration. You've got 88 cities within those counties, and build that capacity beyond the COC model. We're all asking for something that goes even deeper. So there's components, there's tenets of what we're arguing for that already exists, but not at this level and not with this structure. And we think this is I think this personally is long overdue. I wish we had something like this when I was mayor. And I'm very excited what it means for philanthropic support. And I'm very excited about what it means in terms of the utilization of the existing emergency grants and how we can amplify those efforts in a more coordinated manner if we can get the legislative support for creation of this $750 million fund soon.
Governor, you talked about surprise billing. Even Democrats in Congress have struggled with this and rushed with this year. They were unable to overcome intense industry opposition when it comes to some of the details of these proposals.
Yeah.
Are you willing to take on the industry hospital?
I don't look at it that way. We have a great relationship with the industry. We're working on price controls. I've built a strong collaborative in this space. Everybody has come in. They've all, asserted that they recognize they need to be part of something better and more. And so I don't look at it from that perspective. Parity issues, I see some manipulation there. I'm going to be a little more stringent, but I'm confident we can do something with the hospitals and others on this, and I'm going to pursue that.
They have fought these proposals.
Past is not prologue. I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I think we have a good relationship, and we've got a lot of other things at stake. There are a lot of moving parts. We have an ambitious agenda. This is one part of it. I think some of these price targets may amplify more anxiety for them than surprise billing. I think there are a lot of things, a lot of pieces that will move around, and I'm looking forward to those robust conversations to continue as they have been ongoing for many, many months.
Governor, I know you've expanded Medicaid or Medi-Cal to cover those 65 and older regardless of immigration status. Did you expand the earned income tax credit to also cover?
Not included in the January budget.
Okay. What's the distinction you made there? Why for Medi-Cal but not for the?
Well, I-10 is about the working families tax credit. The distinction is, one is health care, a right from my perspective. One is allowing working families to keep more of what they earn. I distinguish the two. And it's also a question of capacity. Want to do a lot of things, can't do everything. It's a January proposal. I'll be back in May. Look forward to working with legislative leaders. And I can assure you, in fact, I could give you some of their quotes in advance of how they're looking forward to working with us to address that issue as one of their top priorities.
Returning for a moment to housing, you hinted earlier that you're planning some sort of reorganization of housing departments within
Yeah.
your administration. Can you give us more detail?
Well, just primarily on the financing is what I was referring to, and the Byzantine nature of, look, we've been having conversations with the Controller's Office, with the Treasurer's Office that administer some of these programs. I serve on some of these committees. They have representatives serve on some of these committees. They're disparate. They're frustrating. There's some excellent leadership on some of them. They lack and they're wanting in others. Some people moving things quickly, some people slowly. There's a lot of bottlenecks. So we're working through a lot of the administrative, muck and deal with some of those issues. And that's a process that's already underway. We're going to formalize more publicly the work group in this space, but just wanted to preview that you'll be hearing more about reforms in that space. And by the way, I want to just thank Fiona Ma. Has been fabulous in terms of our recent conversations in this space. And obviously Betty Yee has been eager to see some, I think, enhancements to our collaborative spirit, HFA, HCD, also CalVets and OPR, which are on our side of the ledger, and then the collective things we do together on TCAC and SID, LAC.
Jumping over to generic drugs, if you look at spending on drugs, while it's noble to go after generic drugs, I'm wondering, will there be a lot of savings, especially when a lot of the cost drivers have been in the brand name side?
Yeah, that's why we're very proud of the work we did, and I began with the preamble of that work last year on the single purchasing. And I noted a number of partnerships will be advancing. I suggested that the $398 million figure, projected savings from the previous year, will be augmented to a substantially higher number. We talked about enhancing the city-county partnerships. We talked about the best price strategies, the Golden Straight schedule that we look to advance, all of that in that space. As you know, we addressed the issue of patents with historic legislation that was provided the privilege and opportunity for me to sign last year as it relates to more transparency in the patent space and on the pay for delay side of the ledger. All of that goes specifically to your very, I think, important point.
Governor, can you talk about what plans you expect to advance this year on increasing housing production? And as part of that answer, can you address the recent changes to SB 50?
Good. Well, I hope we can go back because I talked a lot about the specific things we'll be doing and went through that list in some detail. And I'm happy to provide that to you separately. And again, on the issue of SB 50, we need to get something done. And we're working aggressively to do that, not just with the author, but substantively with the author, but also with leadership and members that may be on the fence that are looking for amendments. I know Senator Wiener's working overtime on that, and we want to complement that and support those efforts. Just coincidentally, and it's happened to strangely be in, here are a number of the amendments that happened just to be in our document from a meeting we had on this just late last night. So we are working overtime in this space.
Governor, there's about 500,000 units in housing that have been approved, but developers have decided they just aren't going to pencil out, so they're sitting there. Is there anything you can do as governor?
Yeah, take a look at page 115 of the budget, the upper right. You'll see a chart with 4 graphs, quite literally, page 115. And you will see your question and point reinforced and highlighted. It's the most vexing struggle that we have. And a big part of our efforts this year is to address that gap. As you know, we sued Huntington Beach. You may not know that Huntington Beach is now in compliance. We put on notice 46 other cities. 16 of the original 47 are now in compliance, many more on the way. I want to compliment the team that Huntington Beach put together that worked with HCD over the holidays, and HCD has certified their compliance. It has to now be codified by the City Council in Huntington Beach. I say that as a demonstrable proof point and example to the issue of accountability and address the delta, the gap between our expectations and performance, between zoned and actually constructed units. We also have to deal with a myriad of issues as it relates to pre-development issues associated with uncertainty. You know there was a number of CEQA reforms last year, 4 that I signed, 1 that we advanced in our trailer bill on CEQA related to 100% affordable housing as it related to supportive housing under Prop 2, as it related to issues of shelters, navigation centers. I think there's opportunities to address through pre-development programs and programmatic EIRs some of that risk. And as you know, by citing more of these opportunities on state properties, we can fast track the approval process and regulatory process. We'll be putting out, it's part of our plan in detail, we'll be putting out model local ordinances on pre-clearance to help locals in this space so we can address that delta and that gap.
Governor, vaping tax and regulation proposals, there's mounting frustration in the legislature that certain members have been able to block those types of policies from advancing. Do you see doing this in the budget as a way to circumvent those kinds of
I don't see it in those terms. I see an imperative as a parent, as a citizen, as an observer of addressing the vaping crisis. Scares the hell out of me as a parent, hearing what I'm hearing, what's happening in middle schools, not just high schools. And I think this vaping tax is long overdue. And I think I don't expect we're going to have major problems with it because I think the vast majority of legislatures support it.
Governor, part of the public safety power shutoffs, obviously we saw this was a major issue this fall and communities weren't prepared. In this budget, you're funding it with 50 million compared to 75 last year, so can you, or this year?
Because I expect less, not more. If I was going to put more money, I would have a negative outlook when I have a more optimistic outlook about the work we've been doing over the course of the last many months, over the course of a year. As you recall, we inherited a new homeless number of 150,000, and I inherited a bankrupt utility. Those now are my responsibility to lay out strategies and a framework to address those issues head on. Both those are vexing issues. As a consequence, you know, I don't need to get into details because you'll be hearing a lot more about this over the course of the next few months. We've been leading an effort with equity and bondholders to consider strategies to get out pursuant to SB 1054 before June 30th of this year to get this IOU PG&E out of bankruptcy. Part of that is addressing the PSPS protocols. That, however, we are doing in real time. The severity and the duration of these, the number of these PSPS protocols, we're working in real time with the PUC on addressing. We have new strategies in terms of engagement, OES, pre-positioning our assets to reduce the severity and reduce the duration. That's already underway, and you'll be hearing a lot more as we process the proposals out of bankruptcy that will have at the core responsibility and requirements to significantly mitigate the number of times that process and protocol is utilized. That's why I believe we do not as a state need to put as much money into this space because they will be doing a hell of a lot more in this space.
Are you going to be pursuing a state level tax credit for opportunity zone investments again like you tried last year?
Yeah, I ran short last year. I want to see where people are on this. There's 879 zones. I was pleased that the budget included $100 million of tax room and abatement in that space, yet on the trailer bill, they decided not to support it. So I want to work with legislative leaders. This is a process. It's January. Look forward to a May revise that may or may not include it. I want to know where they are on it.
What were the main sticking points, or how do you think you might be able to get more buy-in this year?
There's probably 100 plus items that we'll be working on. I'll add this to the queue. I thought we did the hard work, which was get the budget approved last year, but for whatever reason, you'll have to ask them. They didn't feel it was important last year to get it done, even though we had budgeted the money for it. Our priority, they may have different priorities, maybe this is it. It was affordable housing and green tech. I thought that appropriate to limit it to those two spaces. But others may have better ideas, and I'm all ears. In fact, just yesterday, I talked to one of the senior members on this, might as well mention Senator Hertzberg, who's passionate in this space about the topic, and he is eager to re-engage on this, and I look forward to doing so. Oh, sorry.
You've had this task force working on figuring out how to finance the expansion of it. So when are we going to hear what they?
Shortly. We aren't there yet. It just convened a number of months ago. Can't do everything overnight, but we can do something no one else has done, and that's what we have done. Went from 6 to 8 weeks per individual, husband, wife, wife, wife. And we're going to advance job protections this year. We reduced the reserve account to help finance that last year. We made some augmentations, 55 to 70, 60% for everybody else on some of the eligibility requirements last year. We made a lot of progress in a short period of time, and I'm committed to getting to 6 months. And O'Leary's committed to getting 6 months. That's why she took the job, quite literally. That wasn't made up last year. Mark Galley on CalAIM and O'Leary on paid family leave. And I have a wife who will not rest until we start getting serious about supporting working mothers in particular, but increasingly working fathers.
So is there a cost for those job protections then?
The job protection, we'll work with the legislature. I'll get you information on the cost of that. Now, the costs are not borne directly by the general fund. The cost would be borne if you were the Chamber of Commerce more indirectly. As you know, they put that as a quote-unquote job killer last year. They laid out details of why they think there's a cost to that. They have a perspective. My perspective is slightly different than theirs.
What about the wage replacement piece of it?
Wage replacement went up from 55 to 70 last year and 60% for certain categories. So we advanced the wage replacement reforms last year. Again, I want to do everything. Can't do everything overnight, but we can do a lot. And job protections will be a priority for the January budget. I'll have a May budget, and we'll have a budget we sign. Look forward to the ideas, creative ideas from the task force and members of the legislature. Hannah Beth Jackson, in particular, has just been a superstar in this space and should be complimented, cannot be complimented enough in terms of her desire to see us do more.
Governor, like your budget, document talks about how your administration designed possible statutory changes, financial spending for a possible state takeover in PG&E, but I know that we're kind of far out from that, obviously, in terms of the bankruptcy. But I was just hoping to hear your latest thinking surrounding PG&E.
It's the same thinking as has been in the past. We decided to put it in the budget, so there's no ambiguity. We have a break the glass scenario. If we have a utility, an investor-owned utility, in this case PG&E, that does not meet the mandates set forth in 1054, we have a plan. The plan prescribed specifically expectations. That's 1054. If they can't meet that, then the state will have no choice but to be in a position to take over that utility in order to create a framework for safe, affordable, reliable service in the state of California. Make no mistake that I included it in the budget because I'm serious about it. And if you think it was just words on paper, I can assure you, on the basis of my time off during the holidays, was time on this issue, focused on what that would look like, what it would not look like, including a potential legislative play in the short term.
Can you give us any contours of what that would look like?
I'm sorry.
Governor, your budget includes $20 million for food banks to mitigate the impacts of the Trump's food stamp cuts. But that hardly covers the price tag of the cuts where they go in effect in April 1st.
Yeah,
I'm wondering what else you're willing to do.
Yeah, we're looking at employment things. We're looking at ways that we can help mitigate. The cuts have not gone into effect. There's a series of actions we're taking beyond just helping support our food banks. And those actions will advance as we get more clarity. Look, we have some preliminary estimates. I think it's $6.1 billion in this space that comes to the state of California. By some estimates, there's $400+ million that may be at stake. The state is not in a position to backfill directly the federal contributions by writing a $400 million check. That would have to come out of DDS. It would have to come out of our homeless protection programs. It would have to come out of law enforcement. However, we are in a position to look at ways of strategizing to get more people enrolled, to make sure that we can mitigate, once we see the details of the rulemaking on it, mitigate the impact. We have some creative folks over here that we may be able to significantly minimize that $400 million projection. And that's why I put as a placeholder the 25 million in this space, 20 for the food banks, 5 million for our website. Website is part of that second conversation, and you'll hear a lot more in the next few months, but it's a very wise question.
Can we have a section here about local jail oversight? Just wonder if you could offer some more specifics about what that entails and what you envision.
Well, I've got a board that's responsibility is oversight. This is what BSCC, and I want to see them step things up, and we've directed that. I want to see some real action. They do a lot of investigating. The follow-up, I'm not satisfied with, and so you're going to see more in that space. You're going to hear more around personnel in this space. We've already engaged BSCC directly in this, but we have a statutory oversight body. The governor has a role to play in terms of how that body advances its enforcement. And like a lot of things, I don't need a shiny new object. I need to see some accountability in the executive implementation of their rules and regulations and their work, just like CalJam and others. So that's what we're working on in that space.
Can you highlight what you plan to do on opioid and substance abuse disorder in this budget?
We've made tremendous progress in this state on opioids. Significant increases in the prescription of buprenorphine, significant reduction compared to the national rate of growth in terms of the number of overdoses. We have now shifted a lot of attention, not away from opioid epidemic, which continues to increase, but at a slower rate of growth than the federal government, to issues of heroin and fentanyl, of which we have seen some very alarming rise in overdoses, and on methamphetamine. And I am very worried about the meth issue. You'll see in this budget, not in the summary, but in the larger, thicker budget, some language around meth. A big part of the CalAIM focus is on the issue, I say broadly, of behavioral health, which is a way of saying not mental health and substance abuse, but behavioral health and the integration. So many people, as an example, on the streets and sidewalks are self-medicating with drug or alcohol addictions that have behavioral health issues. And so the issue of the duly diagnosed is front and center as part of our CalAIM proposal, incentivizing payments, changing our strategies on integration, stabilizing individuals so we can deal with the challenges, these multiplicity of challenges. So we want to continue down that path, and a big part of that budget is set aside in this space.
Governor, when you talk about Lanham and Petra's Short Act reform or overhaul, are you envisioning more beds in state hospitals? Are you envisioning beds
Community-based?
in facilities?
Yeah.
And are they locked wards?
Yeah, no, it's, and it's the question I anticipated you might ask, and I also wanted to leave you, as I said, with an anticipation of being left wanting with my response. So I intentionally will leave you wanting for more specifics. Because, look, the whole movement around deinstitutionalization was appropriate and wise. What wasn't wise was the support of community-based alternatives in a culturally competent way and our unwillingness to fund and resource them. Democrats, not just Republicans, are complicit in this. It is very lazy just to blame Ronald Reagan for all of the ills in this space, as much as a good Democrat would like to. He is certainly part of it, but so is the Supreme Court. So are civil libertarians, for good reason. The advent of Thorazine, lithium, and other things allowed people to be medicated in the community. It didn't have to be behind a locked door in an institutional setting. That's a good thing. So my preference, my bias, I think, is expressed in that preamble. That said, the CalAIM proposal and other work we're doing specifically in the area of this new homeless fund is to connect the resources to expand capacity. What was an interesting debate Gally and I had was his belief that there is tremendous capacity in the system today without constructing new bed that is underutilized, that could be substantially advanced through the creation of this fund and the work under CalAIM. So that's where we'll go first. But there's no doubt in my mind, and I was of the opinion there's not enough capacity. He's of the opinion there is a lot more than you think, that the additive work that needs to be done must be done at a community-based level. I would hate to go back to the old institutional model, even a modern version of building huge, concentrated, state-run facilities with locks and keys. I have visited enough of those, particularly one in Napa recently, that I just don't want to see those replicated for my kids and grandkids to suffer through.
Elaborate. Governor,
Sorry.
Can you elaborate on your proposal to hire 555 firefighters and spending $100 million on making houses more
We're doing
resilient?
677 over the next few years, but we're doing that to do two things. One is, last year, you may have recalled, we did a surge executive order during the peak of the fire season. There's no peak from my perspective any longer. There may have been more acuity during a certain period of time, but we had a lot of wellness issues. We had a lot of issues with that fourth fighter on these rigs and units that were not addressed prior to that executive order. I want to annualize that executive order in essence. I want to stabilize that. I'm really worried about the exhaustion and the mental health, not just physical health, of our firefighters. I think this has to be done. It's a huge cost. It's a lot of ongoing expense. It's the right thing to do. And so that's why it's a top priority. As it relates to home hardening, there's two components of that budget. There's the state contribution, and then, and by the way, I want to just compliment Member Woods and others for their work and guaranteeing that state contribution. But there's also a federal contribution, north of $75 million, I believe, that also we're utilizing on the hardening. That's for defensible spaces, in addition to traditional grants for what we lazily refer to as upgrades on people's homes. So it's a combination of all of the above.
Governor,
For your budget, can you talk a little bit about the generic branding label? What work has been done? What do you know about what this would cost the state? And who would be ultimately in charge?
So as I noted, we've been in advanced conversation with some of the largest purchasers in the state of California. We've been working on that for some time. We've been talking about this for 6 months. This was one of the first conversations we had when we were putting together this year's new budget. Those conversations have advanced. I think Dr. Galley said the following: if you disclose the individual providers that we are working with, I will collapse and fall over, was, I think, the exact quote. So forgive me for not giving you what I know you want. Who the hell are we talking to? But no, we're talking to some of the largest providers in the country that happen to reside and do business here in the state of California. And we have had advanced conversation. I gave you an example on insulin. It's just one, many examples of where we think this could drive down costs significantly. And we will have trailer bill language, and we will have a legislative strategy as early as spring of this year. I'm encouraged by 5 heads nodding, not just one.
Governor, you said your thoughts on redevelopment. So I want to ask you what those thoughts are.
Yeah, that, look, I know I'm nostalgic for redevelopment. I was mayor of a redeveloped city. I was proud of that. Some of the best things that happened in San Francisco were because of redevelopment. Some of the worst things back in the day. Ask the folks in Fillmore about redevelopment in the past. I was a bit antagonistic as lieutenant governor when Governor Brown advanced the proposal to shut it down. But the world's changed since that budget was passed. And while I appreciate the drumbeat to provide redevelopment again, I just ask for this: show me the money. Where do I cut? What programs do we eliminate? How do we pay for it? Now, I offer that as point one, but I also offer this as point two. The last full year of redevelopment was a $1.6 billion hit to the general fund and its obligations, be it 98, ERAP, et cetera. This year, under the cap and trade money, we're putting $468 million. That did not exist in the past. That's new money. We're putting $277 million because of pro tem Atkins transaction fee. That money did not exist when redevelopment died. We're putting $1 billion in tax credits and loan funds that did not exist, $1 billion when redevelopment died. We're putting $400 million in No Place Like Home. That money did not exist. We're putting $563 million in just Prop 1. I'm just giving you 2.7 billion reasons why we're doing a lot more than the 1.6 billion when redevelopment died. I gave you 6.8 billion reasons when I gave the budget presentation. That's the total amount of investment in the housing space this year. So we have substantially replaced those dollars In fact, significantly increase those dollars from when redevelopment was taken away. But for those that want redevelopment, and I was among the chorus, all I ask is, what are you going to do to make up for the Prop 98 K through 12 education cuts? Where does that money come from? What do you want to take out specifically? I don't mean to challenge folks, because I appreciate the spirit of what they're trying to do, but I am here to challenge members of the legislature that we have to be prudent. We have to balance budgets, and we have to meet this crisis head on, and I think we're doing both, balancing the budget and replacing those dollars, enhancing those dollars, and meeting the challenge without redevelopment.
You have some pretty strong words for health plans on mental health parity and access and quality.
Yep.
I want to make sure I'm interpreting it right. So are you saying you're going to go after managed care plans, counties, if they don't meet?
We are making parity a priority. I'll leave it at that. And we are making it clear without any ambiguity that we will be aggressive on enforcing the law. We have the tools and capacity to do that. We don't need new legislation to tell us to do that. We have the capacity to do that. And you'll be hearing a lot more about that. And we will fine people for not meeting the letter and terms of their obligations.
Does that also apply to the physical health plans, like access and quality?
Well, you'll be hearing a lot more about this.
It looks like funding for clean trucks, buses, and cars is going down this year. Can you talk a little bit about
Well,
that?
the whole cap and trade fund, as you know, was disproportionately higher because there was a lot of reserves that were carried over in the previous year. Now it's sort of stabilized close to that $1 billion mark. I think it was 965, my recollection. And so as a consequence of not being around 1.3, 1.4 last year, there's shifts in all of those accounts. And so we'll have a chance to adjudicate that with the legislature. Good people will have their points of view, and I look forward to those expressions. And perhaps in the May revise, we can reflect those. But I think we did justice to outreach, and I think the priorities that we placed in here, particularly with the new capital plan we put out and the substantial amount that will be in transportation and the linkages now to low carbon green growth, climate, and transportation that we're trying to advance through previous executive orders, one that I think got a lot of attention, I think also will go a long way. And I will close by saying that resiliency fund very directly could advance the cause of reducing tailpipe emissions and conversions through new technologies. Very specifically, that fund is designed to address that issue in very meaningful ways.
Governor, there's a very large amount of money poised for a ballot measure campaign on AB5 by Uber and Lyft and those folks. Can you talk about, do you think they have a point that they need specific language to be exempted from AB5? And are you also willing to engage this very large discussion about,
well, you know, I've been
more exclusions to the law?
You know, I've been engaged in this topic for some time. We fell short of advancing a compromise in this space. And there are, seems like every day there are a dozen people that reach out to me privately and very visibly publicly to express concerns about other aspects of this. But again, this was a creation of the California Supreme Court because of the inaction of the state to address this issue going back many, many years. We just codified it under AB5. This is not new. It's old. Codification's new, sharpened the focus. The legislature, to their credit, amended out a lot of industries and components, and I believe the spirit continues upstairs to look at the facts, to adjudicate them, to consider amendments for others, and that includes more broadly in the tectonic gig economy space, because this is not just about the gig economy. I remain open to argument, interested in evidence. I was proud to sign the bill. It was the right thing to do. Misclassification is a big issue. You can't talk about growth and inclusion without talking about workers and compensation and benefits. And California is leading the nation on this. This is a tough space. That's why I created this Future of Work Commission. That's why we're going to consolidate a lot of our workforce development. And that was something I did not highlight, but is in the budget. And we are creating a new, not only work group, we're creating a new department in this space because we're just getting started as it relates to now experiencing the future a lot of us predicted.
Do you think you can head off that ballot thing?
We'll see. There's a lot. I currently have a running list of things that are happening on the ballot, things that are not happening on the ballot. There's a lot of green, there's a lot of red, and there's a lot of yellow, and I'm on the yellow. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Enforcement powers, is your administration investigating Uber
we are doing what is appropriate under the law. And I'll remind you, this budget, moments ago, I presented a budget specifically referenced AB 5 that included $17.5 million that will go to Julie Sue. I complimented her work on enforcement as it relates to issues associated with AB 5. So we are hitting the ground running. The application and enforcement will be forthcoming, and we believe very strongly that what we did was appropriate, and we remain vigilant about those that feel differently, and we want to accommodate those that should be accommodated and not accommodate those that should not be accommodated.
How far is that waiver request going? I mean, are you asking to use healthcare money for housing, or is it more about connecting to housing?
Connecting linkages to housing. We believe that our 1915B waiver distinguishes itself from the 1115B demonstration waiver in its capacity to deliver what CMS promotes. We believe the 1915B approach is a better approach than the 1115 approach. We believe we are more likely to receive that waiver, and we believe these linkages absolutely are aligned with the federal government's own promotion of the utilization of these resources. So we're confident in our ability to succeed, and we're confident that we can significantly increase the linkages, particularly in recuperative care and rapid rehousing. This is not permanent source of subsidies for rents. We're not naive about that, and the Trump administration watching, that's not what we're asking for. We believe we'll meet what the letter of the expectations are.
You mentioned the 40% increase in funding for school lunches because of what? Like
The Moscone nickel?
Yeah, like you're trying to step in for where the federal government is.
Well, the federal government provides $2.3 billion a year on school lunches. They're the bulk of our meal program. The state of California provides $173 million. It's modest from my perspective. I want to increase that contribution by $70 million. And in doing so, I also want to leverage the work that Jen is doing and Kat Steyer and others are doing to leverage healthier, more nutritious meals.
But are there any other examples in this budget of California, stepping in where the federal government has pulled back?
Probably, my estimate, 3-4 dozen examples. I gave you the hatchery issue, the biodiversity, the chemical issues. All those are areas. The Consumer Protection Bureau, a substantive example of that. The work that we continue to do on healthcare, all across the board. The food banks. I mean, my gosh, a big portion of this budget is a requirement under the circumstances of the assault coming in the Trump administration, but also it's a point of contrast and pride. We balance budgets in California. We believe in fiscal discipline. We believe within living with our means. The federal administration does not believe in fiscal discipline. They do not believe in living with their means. We're worried about the next generation. They seemingly are not. They're running historic deficits at a time of historic economic growth that they inherited from the Obama administration. I inherited the same from the Brown administration. The contrast, though, is we are doubling down on prudence and discipline. We're paying down debts. We're paying down long-term obligations. It is very much a contrasting point, this budget in the nation's largest economy versus the federal budget, which I think runs short.
Speaks towards efforts to improve the state's recycling infrastructure and support legislative efforts to hold producers responsible for.
Correct. You going to ask me about SB 54?
Yeah. So
I didn't hear you. Sorry. I'm working on this. I caution to get too involved in the legislative weeds at this stage because a lot of moving parts. I'm not naive about the pratfalls of doing so, but there is a reason I stated that. It shows a desire to move and a deep desire to look at packaging, to look holistically at the whole recycling space. You may or may not know this, and forgive me, I will spare you a long preamble or at least post-analysis. I was deeply committed in San Francisco to this space. We were able to get our recycling rates among the highest in the United States. I was the guy, didn't just do gay marriage, we did requirement for composting, which I assure you is even more controversial than marriage equality. So I'm very desirous to see something get done, and I'm very proud of Members Stern, Alan and others that are committed to this as well.
Governor, I think on housing, the section seems to emphasize more things that you did in last year's budget and trying to work with the legislature than new initiatives of your own. Have you maxed out on what you as governor can do to?
Well, the
boost
budget is the
production in
budget.
state?
The budget's not a housing strategy. That's a legislative strategy as much or more than anything else. It's about leadership. So it goes way beyond just money. In fact, what we did last year was slightly novel. States don't put in billions of dollars of budget money for housing. That was actually unique. Just proof if that was the $85 and $43 million in the loan and tax credit program that existed for years and years in the state. I increased them to $500 million each. The infill grants are without precedent. Usually they're done through bond programs. So what we did was unique, was to jumpstart things, to move things, to focus with more energy on this topic. But we have legislative work to do this year. We had 330 last year, which was incredibly important. There was a lot of good legislation signed last year that seemingly was in the shadow of SB 50. This year, that shadow looms large, and we are committed to advancing the cause and getting to where we need to go. But to advance it, it's not just a governor's desire, it's not just a legislative leader's desire, it's all of us rowing in the same direction. I've got to work with the legislature and its leadership, not just the author, and looking forward to getting something done big in that space.
Governor, the last financials I looked at for PG&E, I think they valued their assets at something like $80 billion. Is there anything you can say to the 6 out of 10 Californians if you have to break the glass of how you can protect them from having to share in the cost
There'll be a
of
lot
government
more.
takeover?
There'll be a lot more coming out in the next few weeks and months about what we'll be pursuing in terms of making real the A pages, as we refer to them, in the budget.
You talked about investment in the technology of the DMV and its cybersecurity, LiDAR. What do you consider the most significant, investment or newer continuing?
Well, the LiDAR
technology
investment's $80 million. It's not insignificant. It's about 3D mapping of the entire state to allow us to do more predictive analysis of hotspots or potential hotspots, to allow us to pre-map and pre-deploy for prevention strategies. It also has a land use natural resource advantage. So it's not just an emergency preparedness, it's a wildlands advantage more broadly. I'm very excited about that. By the way, that comes from this innovation sprint that we announced in last year's budget that's already proven itself. Yeah, thank you. My God, you're my reporter of the year. You didn't even know that. And that has already produced and procured some really interesting new technology, including technology that the IOUs now have contracted with that we had consulted on through that procurement sprint. So I'm hoping to just energize that entire space. We created as well last year that Office of Digital Innovation. That's this whole new thrust, new energy in that space. So I don't want to point to the $200 million at DMV to pave over the old cow path and then provide some bells and whistles on apps as particularly enlivening. But I do suggest that this space is something that in the first year we sort of set up the architecture to focus on. In the next few years, I really want to double down on the whole procurement process, the RFI, RFQ process, RFP process, and really start to address the incumbent protection racket, as I describe it, of large-scale IT procurement in the state of California, which is legendarily problematic and mismanaged.
Regarding the split roll initiative that's moving toward the ballot, do you have a position on that?
I do. It's reflected in the draft, and we'll be working over the course of the next number of months on all of these initiatives, and you'll have clarity from me about where we are. Suffice to say, I didn't wake up learning about these things. We have been monitoring them. We've been engaged in the deliberative process. We are making assessments and determining what's possible, what's not possible. I'll be candid with you. We run our own independent analysis of these things. We listen to the advocates, and we try to stack things up, compare and contrast what strengthens a ballot, what weakens a ballot. We want to sense of where the leadership is. They have done their own work over the course of the holidays. They'll be doing their retreats. We'll be counseling and caucusing with them, including leaders of the Democratic Party, substantively the chair of the Democratic Party, to see where we land on a multiplicity of issues, some that we're not even debating right now that may end up on the ballot.
But Governor, last year you talked about the possibility of a data dividend for
Yes.
consumers.
Where does that stand now? Is it still in the-
Nathan Gardell's, who I just now laid out, I shouldn't have said that, we have others working on this. This is stubborn, more complex, and more tectonic in terms of its consequences. So we continue to pursue this idea. I made the point at the time, this was an audacious idea, and I would argue ideal. Forgive me, like single payer, I think it's inevitable in this nation, a data dividend or some version of it. I am trying to get ahead of that. I like to see where trend lines are going, see if we can bend them and lean into them. And I believe this is one of those areas.
Governor, the California Consumer Privacy Act just took effect. Do you have any new funding or larger source of resources for the Attorney General's office?
Yeah, the Attorney General's budget was enhanced. By the way, there's a ballot initiative potentially on that to strengthen it. I do have many positions that I want to share, but at the right and appropriate time. But these are deep conversations. It's just, look, you guys know the routine. It's when these things are ripe, you make public. There's negotiations on a lot of these, and I know people want clarity, some advocates in particular, pro or con. It's just more complex when you're managing a multiplicity of issues and you're looking at the ballot differently than most. People just see their issue. I'm trying to manage the state's interests more broadly, and there are some things coming out of left field that concern me that will impact those negotiations and conversations, and I want to be prepared for that.
Have enough resources?
AG will tell you, as every good AG has, going back to Earl Warren, never enough resources. But I believe, Keeley, our budget finance guru, we did justice to the Department of Justice budget, but never enough, says the spokesperson at the DOJ in response to the governor's budget proposal today.
Just to the point of the ballot stuff, since Laurel asked you about split roll, last January, when you unrolled the budget, and I asked you about the split roll measure, you said, I want to work to see if there's a middle ground.
Right.
We're a year later, there doesn't seem to be any middle ground. Is this?
Well, there's been a lot of things that have happened. There's been proposals to increase taxes, independent to raise money for our school system that fell short. To suggest that things just happen is curious to me when things happen often for reasons. And there are a lot of things that have happened in the last year that precipitate movement and actually went so far, and you know this, to require resubmission for signatures to be gathered on the basis of that initiative. So nothing from last January has been static, is my point.
But during the campaign, you said that issue could be something that would provoke like a broader discussion about reform, tax reform that you wanted to have.
I desire in the long term, forgive me, I know it's now been an official 12 months, and I know it's been 20, maybe 30, 40 years they've been talking about tax reform. I believe tax reform is long overdue in the state of California. By the way, I hope you could take a look at the school bond, which we helped negotiate, the great work of those upstairs, Donald and others, that included some tax reform on fees. That was a down payment on our thinking. I'm committed to the long haul here. It's not just about situational politics, it's about sustainable politics. And it's also about what's possible. I could be stubborn or I could be pragmatic. And here I want to be stubbornly pragmatic. I really applaud Senator Hertzberg's leadership in this space, Think Long Committee, the Berggruen Institute, a bipartisan coalition that goes back to California Forward's work on the tax reform. None of them are ideological about this. They all have a willingness to work collaboratively, and you have to create the right conditions for that to take place. And the conditions, I don't think at the moment are ideal, but that doesn't mean we're not continuing to pursue a consideration for a broader tax proposal.
Governor, the regional administrator's role in the homelessness proposal, just to clarify, cities and counties will be eligible to apply in the RFP for, being
Yeah, we
within-
want a regionalized focus. We want the cities and counties to work more collaborative together than they currently have. I think it is completely inadequate, the city-county collaboration. Some cases it's very impressive, others it's absolutely absent. I think the regional administrators will force collaboration in a way we haven't seen in the past and complement some of the good work that's been done and really reset the inadequate work that continues to persist in some counties and some cities.
And the metrics that you mentioned in your executive order related to that, is that for the $750 million that you proposed in this budget or including the $6 million?
Yeah, I'd like to
last
broaden it. It's certainly with the $750 million, but I want to see, look, it goes to that first question that Carla asked. We all want to judge on what we see. Look, I've been doing the homeless stuff long enough to know seeing is believing. You know, when I said I got 12,000 people off the streets, people said, yeah, good, not, you know. And I could show you the data, it's a fact, but no one believed it. So, I mean, Carla said it right. People want to see encampments gone. Now, I want to see something deeper than that, but I'm not naive to what the public deems is proof of investments paying off. And so it's not just about the surface, it's about the substance. It's about more of a holistic look. You don't get, you know, you hear me say this all the time, we don't talk enough about saves. You don't get credit for saves, but we really want to focus on stabilization. We want to focus on first and last month's rent. We want to focus on an emergency grant to keep people housed because we'll never catch up. And so those are the metrics that we're laying out. And let me just give you a proof point on that. That's what the 100-day plans were all about. What I love about these 100-day plans is they're clarifying. And each county, each city, COC, and ultimately these regional administrators are going to be able to lay out detailed terms what their goals are for their regions. And then we'll be able to measure against them and we'll be able to finance them. And so it's about transparency measurement, but it's not just an opaque black box of more money. More money is not going to solve this alone. We need real accountability and transparency in how the money's spent, and we need to see people off the streets, particularly chronic single adults. And those obviously manifest with these tents in these encampments.
Governor,
Oh, sorry.
you mentioned before about Trump tweets about homelessness, and he's tweeted about a lot of things about California. You've had some pretty pointed tweets about him and his policies. I mean, why do you engage with him on Twitter, and kind of who are you speaking to? When you
I said when he attacks our diverse communities, he attacks the values of the state. I take that personally because I care deeply about the values of the state and I care deeply about the people of the state. If I'm not willing to stand up to a bully, if I'm not willing to stand up to someone who's attacking immigrant communities and refugees and attacking the healthcare people that are working hard every single day, try to feed their families, then I don't belong here. And so I'll always have the back of the people of the state.
Governor, just a couple of detailed questions. The hearing aid proposal doesn't have any specifics on funding.
It's in there. What's the number on that?
We were estimating around 10 million, but
Yeah. We're still working, but it's in there, and we will work with the legislature. I know that they have an additional proposal in that space. I look forward to hearing more about their ideas on that.
Oh, so this would not apply to people with, I just want to be clear, this would, if you have existing coverage, this would not apply to you. It would.
Does, so this, that's the distinction. So the Medi-Cal component's separate from that.
On pensions,
Oh, good. Pensions.
The state has done work on paying down its liabilities, but cities are having a real tough
God bless
time.
you. God bless you.
Even when they pass tax increases and even when they negotiate with their employees, what can you tell them?
Well,
These folks who are dealing with these
I think I was involved in 3 pension reforms as mayor. It's part of the job description. But you got to do it with people, not to people. And that's our approach. And so I say this to respect the sensitivities in this space and to honor the complexity of these issues. I'm not naive about it. I was a practitioner in my mayoral capacity, and I watched the PEPRA process in 2013. I watched the Smith process a few years later. That's $6 billion, which we're paying back in our budget, portion of the interest associated with that. You watched our $9.1 billion commitment last year and an additional $1.1 billion commitment in the forecast period. And I also was very sober about the unfunded liabilities and recognized that $250.6 billion is significant. But I also acknowledge that we are at 65.7 and close to 70% at PERS, 65.7 at STIRS. those numbers are old numbers, and I'm looking forward to new numbers. So the unfunded liabilities are a struggle, but I'm glad we're California and not a lot of other states that are even more perilous position. But I just want folks to know we're trying to hit this head on, and I also recognize people think this is completely inadequate and we need to do a lot more, and that requires all of us to work together and thoughtfully in the future. But the state obligations, we are in a much better position, as you note, than a lot of cities, and those city concerns are very, very real in the next few years, and we are gaming a lot of scenarios out. The economy collapses and those obligations begin to crowd out services. What do we do for school districts, and what do we do for cities and counties?
There are some people in the legislature who have already reached the level where they want to see PG&E's monopoly ended. There are also local efforts to try to buy out chunks of the grid from PG&E. I'm wondering if you can address both. Like, what is sort of the red line that would get you on board with a plan for a state takeover? And then at the local level, regardless of how the statewide effort goes, is there anything you can do to help San Francisco, South San Joaquin, and the other efforts to buy out chunks of the
We've,
grid?
as you know, been helping those efforts. We've advanced those efforts. We've made those public, not just rhetorically. There's been letters exchanged between the city and county of San Francisco and my office to advance the same, both from the city attorney's office and the mayor's office. We've been in constant contact with Sean Ellsburn, the chief of staff of Mayor London Breed. I've personally been in a lot of contact with Mayor Sam Liccardo. Our team has been in contact consistently with Mayor Sam Liccardo and his representatives. We've been very clear from day one about the prospects of a state takeover. We've codified that in language in the budget, and I have implied and suggested there may need to be a legislative process, which would then fill in the blanks and answer your question in the kind of specificity and detail that is required of the question. Anybody else?
Governor, just wondered about ODI and what this budget puts forth for ODI and what's.
It's up and running. We're hiring. We're still hiring. We need to identify the talent. They're getting up and running, and then I just put them to work. That's really all we have at this moment as relates specifics of the budget. Basically just building on the commitments we made last year and then putting this thing together, which is a little more challenging than it appears because it's all about talent.
Quick regional question related to your point about parkland. There's Bay Area lawmakers who are asking for state help to buy the M3 Ranch in
The
Bay
N3
Area.
Ranch,
Is that at all on your radar?
perhaps near Livermore. I've heard of it.
At all on your radar in terms of providing
There are a lot of
help to buy that?
there's a lot of requests out there. A lot of requests.
Governor, we've touched on homelessness in all different ways, and I have a really fundamental, basic question. Is it your philosophy or belief that housing is a right?
Well, I think housing's a priority. We are going to receive on Monday my task force recommendations. And they put out some bold ideas, some more controversial than others. And I look forward to the details of their findings. Meanwhile, we're moving on an executive order. We're moving to put an unprecedented amount of money of emergency grants out in real time. We're getting tents and medical units out there on the field in the next few weeks and months. And we'll continue to try to source more voucher support from the federal government. I would encourage the Trump administration. I'm hopeful that they may want to amplify portions of our executive order. Hopeful perhaps that may happen in Los Angeles with more federal property, not just state property, and more support for trailers and other temporary equipment as we advance the ideal to your question that shelters solve sleep, housing and supportive services solve homelessness. We have a housing first mindset, a direct access to housing policy, we call it DAW program. That's our priority, but it's not exclusive. We have to mitigate and triage. We have to deal with the immediate crisis. And that's why these navigation centers were an eligible use with the $650 million of emergency grants. And that's why we're eager to see conversions of motels and hotels. That will happen in real time versus just brand new affordable construction that takes years and years at a cost north of $500,000, some cases north of $750 million per key.
Just really quickly, I take your point on the initiative comments that you
Which
made.
initiative? All of them? All 25 that we're monitoring?
The proponent of the micro initiative and telling people.
That's another one.
You gave them
It's a lot of initiatives. I'm not going to comment anymore. I'm meeting in a few weeks with his principal backers. So we'll be there. I did not promise to put that. Absolutely did not promise to support a ballot initiative or place one on the ballot. Next. I didn't. So that's what I said. I did not.
How are you evaluating this? We've talked about the colors on this chart a few times. I just want, and I'm not asking about yellow, orange, the one about ballot measures, but
All of it. There's things I'm one person. Sorry. I thought how am I evaluating?
I want to understand, like, how are you engaging with different proponents? What is this process writ large look like?
Depends on the initiative. So it's case by case. Some I'm already helping raise money for. Some I'm directly involved in. Some in real time, particularly on the school bond. Actively raising money, actively engaged in the campaign. Some I'm working with proponents. Some are updating me on their progress. Some I feel will fall short, and they don't want any opinion expressed publicly until they see how far they go. Others are encouraging me to get involved in fundraising for them. Others want me to come out and oppose and stop things in the track. It just depends.
Is there a guiding principle you're using in this?
Everything I said in the budget, every value, every utterance, every priority that was expressed, if you can overlay that in terms of the dozens of things that are being considered on the ballot, then you'd have a sense of where I may end up on a lot of these things. My why is to stand up for ideals, strike out against injustice. That's the lens through which I see the world. The budget's a demonstrable example, I hope, of those values being put in evidence. And as it relates to initiatives and referendums, I'll act accordingly. Some things I'm already overtly made my positions known, like bail reform, which I stood here with the authors when they announced their efforts, Mr. Hertzberg and Bonta, celebrating them. It's self-evident where I may end up on those. Others, like Cooper Initiative, you could imagine someone who's an advocate for 57 and 47, 3 strikes and criminal justice, you would imagine where I may end up. But that's a work in progress. We don't know how far they are. Each specific initiative and referendum have a different time and scope.
For the ones that get on the ballot. Sorry, just one more thing. Other governors have been reluctant to tell us where they stood on all of them.
Well,
Would
then why were
commit
you
to telling
pressing
us
me
yes
on
or
all
no?
that? I don't know, yeah.
No, was that a yes or a no? Would you tell us
I mean,
all of them by-
I appreciate you pressing. I'll decide what I support, what I don't, and make public what I support and what I don't, to the extent that I think it helps. May not. I mean, it's like everything. We decide what to emphasize. Sometimes we decide not to emphasize. Some things help when you're on board. Some things hurt. But it all matters. It's a chessboard. It's not a checkers board. This matters in the context of this, and it's all moving around in real time. And the world's changing in real time. I don't know you may know what's going on the ballot. I'm not as convinced as you may be, and I want to see where we end up.
Governor, are you going to make an endorsement in the presidential?
Similarly, I make the same statement that I just made. It's not. Oh, okay. Then it's not an appropriate question. The budget briefing. No, I haven't made any determinations. I've seen a lot of folks that have, and but I hope you've seen over the course of the last few hours that I've been focused and a little distracted on this task at hand, and a little less distracted by some of these other things.
Governor, is the vaping tax the only new tax?
Yeah, I mean, there's some components that will require 2/3. There's always a DTCS issue. There's always a cannabis, the potential cannabis we're adjudicating and figuring out. But the vaping tax is the big one. Those are the 3. There may be a 4th, but we're not convinced. But this is not, for those who want to lead with, liberal California advancing a series of taxes, you're just misleading folks. But you have every right to say we're supporting a vaping tax.
Did the failure of the water tax last year turn you off of some of that?
That enlivened me. That worked exactly as we had hoped for and intended, and I could not be more proud, and that goes into my book in a few years. Anybody else?
Governor, how close are we to that goal that fire scientists have of 1 million acres a year with the changes in the budget to beef up firefighting and forest health?
Well, that's one we're going to need support of the Trump administration. 57% of forested land in this state is managed by the federal government. 2+% is state, the rest is private. Now, we do the responsible thing. We manage a lot of federal property. About half of the money we've invested over the last few years is to manage the federal lands, but we can't do everything. But it would be nice if we can move away from these tweets to responsible policymaking, and the administration would stop their annual requests for budget cuts in forest and vegetation management that only get fixed by Nancy Pelosi's leadership and the Democratic leadership. It would be nice if he started with a budget that enhanced those efforts so that they're more consistent with his professed desires to see California do more. We agree with him. We're doing more than ever. It would be nice to see that he agreed with himself.
I guess,
Speaking of goals, you mentioned earlier your campaign goal of 3.5 million new housing units. How close do you think you're going to get to reaching that?
So I want to make this clear, and I'll continue to be a broken record. I said this last year at this time during the budget. I said it in the May revise. I've said it probably in 24 press conferences, and I'll say it again because I've repeated. I referred to the sixth cycle RENA goals. We're in the process of our sixth cycle RENA goal. It expires at the end of 2022. We'll have those numbers in the aggregate in 2023. I stated in last year's budget the need and desire to break down those goals, that audacious stretch goal that was established by a report McKinsey put out, and it was embraced by all the candidates for governor as the goal that would solve the problem. I said at the time that it was an audacious stretch goal and it needed to be broken down. I'll repeat that it needs to be broken down. And the purpose of the RENA process is to do just that. So we are getting these regional goals. As you know, I pushed SCAG very hard on increasing their goals so that they're more aligned and get closer to that audacious stretch goal. That's the spirit we'll bring as the rest of these regional goals are announced. And then in the sum total of all of that will be the new statewide goal broken down by regions. And then we have, because of legislative work last year, real accountability. I know some felt that it was inadequate, but watch this space. When those 6 RENA goals go into effect and those numbers are enhanced significantly, the tools that were created as it relates to potential receivership and fines will matter greatly. So I thought that was an important piece of legislation that passed near the end of session that deserves to be highlighted in the context of where we're going in this 6th cycle. So we'll have those new goals. They'll be broken out by regions, and we're stubborn about our expectations, and then we'll try to address page 115 of the budget.
As someone who likes to iterate and do things differently, I was just wondering, what are your reflections on your first year as governor, and what would you like to do differently in your second year?
I really look back. I couldn't be more proud of this last year. The fiscal discipline that we demonstrated, the historic investments in the future that we advanced, the work we did on health care, prescription drugs, the new energy in housing and homelessness that I think reinvigorated the space that holds a lot of promise into the future. The use of force work that Dr. Weber did and getting that bill done was a point of real pride, advanced our efforts and our values in the state. The rent control package, I mean, it's just often forgotten, lost, was historic. They've been talking about that for decades up here. I know people may not see the earned income tax credit as profound and important. It's been a point of pride for me going back to my supervisor days, let alone mayor's days. I mean, I can go through, honestly, a list of dozens of things. We threw a lot out there, but laying out a vision and financing that vision in a sequential way, building on the past and the preschool and other things, I'm really proud of. So I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about this next session, next year, about California's future, and so I feel really good about last year.
And then we'll wrap it unless you have one more question.
Don't say I didn't answer any question. Thank you all. Awesome.